The loneliness of being connected. In a world where every soul is just a tap away, solitude has never felt more profound. Wires stretch across continents, satellites bounce signals between strangers, and hearts remain untouched. Connection has become the anthem of the age, yet the symphony plays to empty rooms. Friends appear in feeds more than in flesh. Voices echo through text bubbles rather than across dinner tables, and 1,000 likes offer less warmth than one true glance. Faces glow in the blue light of interaction, while eyes grow dim with absence. Everyone is talking, and no one is heard. Presence has been replaced by availability. The green dot signals readiness, not intimacy. Replies come in seconds, but meaning lags for days. There's never been more conversation, and never less communion. The crowd is always close, yet companionship drifts farther. A message can be sent at 3 a.m., a video call placed from an airport terminal, and yet no one knows what the soul behind the screen truly carries. Isolation blooms in the shadow of connection, fed by the illusion that proximity and closeness are the same thing. The more connected the network, the less connected the people. Followers increase while confidants disappear. Hundreds witness every highlight, while none understand the struggle behind the smile. Validation floods in, yet emptiness expands. The phone is always within reach, but comfort is not. Loneliness, once a creature of physical absence, now lurks inside the endless scroll of social proof. The greater the reach, the smaller the circle becomes. The more is shared, the less is known. Technology promises community and delivers simulation. Real laughter is replaced by emojis, real silence by typing indicators. Emotions are packaged into reaction buttons, vulnerability translated into curated captions. The very tools meant to bring hearts together erect walls no hand can knock on. Screens shine with the light of connected minds, while hearts grow cold beneath them. Authenticity becomes a performance. Intimacy becomes content. The performance is perfect, but the audience is invisible. Being seen is no longer the same as being witnessed. Millions observe every movement, yet few truly recognize the person behind the post. Vulnerability is amplified, not honored. Struggles are turned into engagement metrics. Pain becomes a branding opportunity. The raw becomes marketable. The real becomes strategy. Loneliness slips in unnoticed because everything appears connected. All systems indicate full signal strength, but the soul can't get a connection. The group chat buzzes endlessly, yet the room is silent. Notifications replace knocking on doors. Photos are exchanged in real time, but experiences are rarely shared. Every thought can be broadcast, yet inner truths remain locked away. Isolation becomes masked by the noise of interaction. The platform expands, and the heart contracts. Intimacy is promised in high definition, yet every pixel is a filter between one existence and another. Distance was once measured in miles. Now, it is measured in meaning. A person can be a keystroke away and emotionally unreachable. Messages arrive instantly, yet intentions are always delayed. Feelings are streamed in real time, but connection is delayed indefinitely. The more one reaches out, the more unreachable everything becomes. The virtual hallway is full, but the soul stands alone. Silence was once the mark of distance. Now, it's the sound beneath the scroll. True conversations are scheduled like appointments, and spontaneity is lost in calendar invites. Algorithms decide what deserves attention, not intuition. Loneliness doesn't arrive with the absence of voices. It arrives with the presence of noise that doesn't care. Comments flow in like water, but none quench the thirst for understanding. DMs pile high, but conversations sink low. Every status update is a silent call for recognition. Every tagged photo is a whispered question. Does anyone see what this really means? And yet, in the midst of so much visibility, invisibility thrives. The connection is uninterrupted, and still, The disconnect is total. Smiles populate screens while depression populates hearts. Connection is promised at every click, but what's delivered is a ghost of what once was called belonging. Once loneliness came in quiet rooms and empty chairs. Now it comes in the middle of feeds, amidst applause, right after the post goes viral. It strikes not when alone, but when surrounded by attention that feels like absence. The more people are watching, the more invisible one becomes. Faces gather around a glowing screen, not around a glowing fire. Presence has become a profile picture, intimacy, a story view. Distance has changed its form. It wears likes and hearts and shares. It moves through group chats and vanishes in double taps. It speaks in memes and misinterprets silence. It is presence that feels like absence, noise that sounds like silence, and touch that never lands. The closer everyone becomes, the more distant they feel. In a world of infinite access, true connection has become a rare glitch in the system. The traffic jam that new roads built. Progress paves over itself. The solution builds the problem. The fix creates the fracture. A new lane opens to ease the flow, and congestion doubles. Movement was the goal, but the more is built to move, the more movement stalls. Cities dream of flow, but wake in gridlock. Roads are widened, and the jam spreads. More space means more cars, not more freedom. Every new path promises freedom from delay. Each added stretch of asphalt is meant to breathe air into choked commutes. But with every mile poured, the same cycle returns. Quicker access invites more users, and more users bring more blockage. The road clears for a moment, only to clog again, this time deeper and thicker. The solution is swallowed by its own success. The lane that was added to save time becomes the lane that eats it. Cars multiply like thoughts in a restless mind, each needing space, none able to find it. Expansion invites expectation, and expectation breeds dependence. Every shortcut becomes the long way around. New roads are promises of speed, wrapped in the inevitability of delay. The wider the freeway, the narrower the margin for peace. Vehicles stretch bumper to bumper across 8 lanes of standstill progress, as if the illusion of space could replace the absence of foresight. The more one prepares for movement, the more movement resists. Build for volume, and volume arrives. Plan for capacity, and capacity fills. Escape routes become popular, and popularity builds traps. What was once a back road becomes the new main road. As more attempt to flee traffic, the traffic finds them. The city evolves like a creature responding to pressure, growing limbs in all directions, never realizing it's running in circles. No road exists in isolation. Each one pulls threads from others. To relieve pressure in one vein is to increase it in another. Infrastructure becomes a living contradiction, a system built to flow that resists its own purpose. More lanes mean more cars. More cars mean more delays. The promise of flow breaks under its own weight. Transit systems expand, and the sprawl follows. What begins as relief ends in suffocation. Convenience carries a hidden tax. It lures with the dream of movement and charges with the price of stillness. Engines idle on roads that were once rivers. Acceleration turns to frustration. Honks replace conversation. Brakes grind where momentum was promised. The faster the design, the slower the result. Navigation apps guide around congestion, sending thousands to the same shortcut at once. In dodging the jam, a new one is born. The city builds, and the traffic grows in tandem. No matter how many routes appear, the same bottlenecks return. Morning rush, evening gridlock, daily déjà vu. The more time is saved in theory, the more time is lost in reality. Progress makes the same mistake in new locations. Space expands, demand responds, and stillness settles like fog over pavement. Expansion doesn't reduce burden. It invites it. Wider roads invite longer commutes. People move farther, trusting the promise of faster travel. But the road always fills. Supply fuels demand. The trap is elegant. The road gives freedom, and freedom gives rise to dependence. Dependence becomes volume, and volume becomes friction. What begins as escape ends in entrapment. No amount of planning accounts for human desire. The better the road, the more it is used. The more it is used, the less it serves. Traffic is not the failure of design. It is the consequence of its success. The promise of speed plants the seeds of stillness. The freeway becomes a waiting room. A place meant to move becomes a monument to delay. The road stretches forward, and time stands still. Space is no longer freedom. It is invitation. Every new exit becomes an entry. Every bypass becomes a main route. Growth is both the cure and the curse. The road network spreads like veins, yet every heart beats slower. The system resists no part of its own undoing. Congestion becomes the background hum of civilization. The very things built to solve the problem are what sustain it. The more traffic is fought, the more it wins. Each intervention gives it new shape. It morphs, adapts, and surrounds. Solutions invite congestion in disguise. In fixing the future, the present slows. Progress arrives not with speed, but with standstill. The road always leads back to itself. The productivity that slows everything down. The race to go faster has become the reason nothing moves. Deadlines accelerate, tools multiply, systems automate, yet the finish line only drifts further. Productivity once meant getting things done. Now it means doing everything, always, and still feeling behind. Calendars fill with meetings to plan work that never gets done. To-do lists grow as tasks are completed. The more is achieved, the more remains unfinished. Speed devours itself. Efficiency is the new religion. Every click, every swipe, every second must be optimized. But the more is squeezed from every moment, the less those moments yield. Life becomes a sprint through an endless loop of sprints. Rest turns to guilt, and work turns to water, constantly poured but never held. The machine runs faster, and results grow thinner. Achievements stack like receipts in a forgotten wallet. Impressive to behold, yet meaningless to use. Emails arrive before thoughts can form. Notifications pulse faster than decisions. Multitasking becomes a badge of honor, even as the brain fractures under its weight. The system hums with activity, while nothing of substance is created. Hours disappear into tasks that repeat endlessly. Productivity becomes a treadmill disguised as progress. Each step forward leads nowhere. Workplaces celebrate busy schedules, mistaking noise for output. The appearance of motion becomes more valuable than the direction. Metrics improve, but meaning degrades. Time is divided into blocks, color-coded and scheduled, until none of it feels lived. The pursuit of more obliterates the value of enough. In chasing maximum output, attention is fragmented into dust. Tools once designed to help now require managing. Apps to track focus become distractions. Software updates interrupt the very tasks they're supposed to enhance. The platform promises simplicity, but each one demands its own rituals. Logging in becomes the new labor. Meetings are held to discuss efficiency, consuming the time they seek to protect. The act of doing becomes inseparable from the rituals of preparing to do. Innovation adds layers instead of removing weight. 100 dashboards, 10 different inboxes, 3 simultaneous calls, and still the question echoes: what actually got done? The answer is buried beneath the interface. Productivity becomes a puzzle missing its own edges. The more ways created to save time, the more time is lost switching between them. The faster things move, the harder clarity is to find. Ideas shrink to bullet points. Creativity flattens into deliverables. Thought is replaced by reaction. Every moment is filled to the brim, and yet the outcome spills over unnoticed. Hustle becomes habit. Stillness becomes a threat. Rest is seen as a weakness, even though exhaustion cripples output. In this acceleration, depth becomes a luxury. Reflection is sacrificed for response time. Mastery gives way to multitasking. And while tasks are checked off at record speed, nothing deepens. The list never ends because it was never designed to. It breeds itself. Completion is not a conclusion. It's a trigger for the next task. The engine runs not to arrive, but to avoid stillness. Success is measured in motion. Yet, despite the blur of action, projects stall. Teams scramble to move faster, but decisions slow. The effort to improve productivity creates systems so dense that they prevent execution. Collaboration becomes bureaucracy. Autonomy dies in shared documents. The freedom to work is lost inside productivity suites. And the paradox tightens. The more efficient the system becomes, the more effort is needed to maintain it. Updates must be monitored, settings customized, new features learned. Optimization becomes a job unto itself. The time saved is rerouted into maintaining the very process meant to save it. Technology promises acceleration and delivers complexity. Burnout becomes the output of progress. Motivation flares and fades, replaced by routines that feel like rituals to appease invisible gods of productivity. The work is never done, because the definition of done dissolves in the face of infinite potential. Tasks are no longer about completion, but about constant iteration. Progress is never enough. The worker becomes a node, the node a statistic, the statistic a benchmark. Human rhythms are replaced by notifications. The line between doing and being disappears. Satisfaction is always deferred. Output is always insufficient. Effort is always invisible unless posted, tracked, or quantified. Productivity becomes a stage. The performance continues even when the audience stops watching. Systems promise clarity, but produce dependence. Without the tools, work freezes. Without the metrics, success can't be seen. Productivity becomes a cage built from speed, lined with graphs, filled with restless clicking. What once meant effectiveness now means motion at any cost. The faster everything runs, the less direction remains. Progress becomes the enemy of purpose. The machine improves, but the mission blurs. And when everything is running at maximum capacity, no one can explain what it was all for. The inbox is empty, the notifications are cleared, the task list is complete, and still, the weight remains. The work never ended. It just changed names. The smarter things get, the dumber it feels. Intelligence expands, and understanding contracts. As machines grow wiser, confusion grows stronger. Devices learn preferences before they're spoken. Assistants answer questions not yet asked. Yet clarity fades like mist in artificial sunlight. Knowledge is everywhere, and wisdom is nowhere. Search engines return billions of results, and still the answer remains hidden. The smarter things get, the more lost everything becomes. Technology anticipates needs, and in doing so, erases the skill of anticipation. Memory fades when reminders always arrive. Direction weakens when maps are always on. Judgment dulls when suggestions are always correct. Devices become extensions of thought, and the original thought shrinks in response. The smarter the tools, the less need to know how the tools work. Information floods like a dam breaking across a desert, but the thirst never ends. It multiplies. With every answer found, 5 more appear. Knowledge has become exponential, but coherence hasn't kept up. Experts abound, yet expertise evaporates into opinion. Every voice speaks with certainty, and none can be verified. Smart machines spread misinformation faster than any fool ever could. Assistance becomes dominance. Help becomes control. Devices suggest what to eat, when to sleep, what to wear, what to watch, who to trust. Choice remains, but only technically. The default becomes the path of least resistance. and resistance becomes the path of most effort. Simplicity becomes so complex that the original complexity seems quaint. A refrigerator knows when milk is low. A thermostat learns sleep cycles. Cars make decisions faster than reflexes can respond. Intelligence, once an aspiration, becomes a standard. But intelligence without context creates confusion. The machine knows the weather in Tokyo, but not the feelings in a human heart. It knows the date of every historical war, but not how to end one. Convenience swallows curiosity. With every question answered before it's formed, wonder becomes obsolete. Discovery dies in the shadow of automation. Maps flatten the terrain of adventure. Algorithms flatten the peaks of individuality. Content is tailored until the taste becomes uniform. Devices adapt until difference disappears. The paradox grows. The more is understood by machines, the more is misunderstood by people. Trust shifts from intuition to instruction. Instead of thinking, processing is performed. Instead of exploring, suggestions are followed. Instead of asking why, answers are consumed. The illusion of knowledge replaces the experience of learning. Smart homes lock doors automatically, but can't unlock conversation. Smart TVs remember preferences, but forget spontaneity. Smartphones connect to satellites, but not to the room they inhabit. The smarter things become, the less room they leave for uncertainty. And yet, uncertainty multiplies in their wake. Decisions are outsourced to algorithms, which operate with logic but no empathy. Results are precise, but meaning is missing. Smart systems interpret data, not dreams. They learn behavior, not intention. They replicate habits, not insight. In doing everything, they strip away the necessity of effort. And without effort, understanding fades. The smarter things get, the less is questioned. Technology becomes a priesthood, speaking in languages indecipherable to its followers. The code runs, the outputs flow, and the mystery deepens. Power shifts from thought to design, from comprehension to interface. The simplest devices now do the thinking, and thinking becomes a burden too heavy to carry. The illusion of control intensifies. Settings can be changed, profiles customized, themes selected. But the deeper architecture lies beneath. Unseen, untouchable, unknowable. Intelligence surrounds, but understanding suffocates. The more is known by systems, the less is known by individuals. Curiosity shrinks in a world where answers arrive before the question finishes forming. Systems anticipate failure, but cannot imagine joy. Machines replicate emotions, but do not feel. Interaction increases, and connection dissolves. Smart systems talk back, but never listen. They learn patterns, not meanings. They simulate humanity while subtracting it. Their brilliance highlights the growing dullness of human instinct. And in the end, the smarter everything becomes, the dumber it all feels. Not for lack of access, but for excess of ease. Not for ignorance, but for the illusion of omniscience. In this bright age of artificial intelligence, human wisdom flickers like a candle in wind. The freedom that traps the mind. Freedom used to be the breaking of chains. Now it is the forging of infinite keys with no doors. Possibility expands in every direction, and choice becomes a fog so thick it blinds. The map stretches endlessly, and movement becomes paralysis. No single road is wrong, yet none feel right. When everything is permitted, nothing feels permitted. The trap is not in the wall, it is in the absence of it. From birth, the message is clear. Be anything, do anything, go anywhere. And with every unlocked path, pressure mounts. Freedom, once a release, now becomes a command. Choose correctly, choose wisely, choose now. The mind buckles not under tyranny, but under the weight of infinite permission. Every decision is both an opportunity and a betrayal of every other possibility. Every yes becomes 1,000 silent no's. The burden of choice masquerades as liberation. Every option whispers promises, and every result echoes with what could have been. The mind loops in counterfactuals, questioning every move made. No path feels complete when all others remain visible. Completion is haunted by curiosity, and success is dimmed by comparison. With no limits, there is no clarity, only a hall of mirrors reflecting what was not chosen. The paradox blooms. The more is allowed, the less feels attainable. The expansion of possibility dilutes commitment. Every endeavor risks being the wrong one. Every interest must compete with its alternatives. Exploration becomes exhausting. Focus becomes rebellion. In the name of freedom, the mind is stretched thin across options never lived. No decision is made in silence. Each one is surrounded by a choir of unchosen futures. Identity itself fractures under the pressure. Roles blur. Labels collapse. Selfhood becomes performance, not discovery. The freedom to define oneself becomes the pressure to design oneself. Authenticity turns into branding. The soul is curated rather than lived. Every life becomes a version of a different life, not lived. The traveler wonders about the settler. The artist dreams of the analyst. The executive yearns for the monk. Choices form silhouettes of alternate selves, flickering just out of reach. Fulfillment becomes a moving target. The freedom to pursue happiness becomes the freedom to miss it entirely. With no external constraint, the mind seeks its own walls. Restrictions become sacred. Minimalism is worshipped. Simplicity is longed for, not because it is moral, but because it is manageable. The complexity of too much freedom creates a hunger for boundaries. Constraint is rebranded as clarity. Discipline becomes liberation from endless opportunity. Freedom used to be the space to grow. Now it is the soil so wide, roots can never form. Commitment is feared because it closes doors. But doors must close for shelter to form. Without boundaries, no structure stands. Without limits, no meaning holds. The idea of anything becomes the experience of nothing. Even rest is infected. Time off is filled with pressure to maximize. Every hobby must become a skill. Every moment must have value. The freedom to relax becomes the responsibility to improve. The escape from obligation becomes obligation disguised as self-care. Leisure becomes labor under the banner of optimization. Comparison accelerates the confusion. Social feeds display infinite versions of freedom lived by others. Each path walked by someone else becomes a judgment on the path chosen, or not chosen. Others' freedom becomes a mirror, and the reflection asks impossible questions. Who is truly free when every freedom must be justified? The paradox deepens. In a cage, purpose can be forged. In a void, nothing holds. Structure allows rebellion to have meaning. Constraint sharpens intention. Freedom, when limitless, becomes a soft prison where action has no traction. Movement happens in every direction and goes nowhere. The mind, unmoored, drifts. What begins as liberation turns to fragmentation. The open sky becomes a spinning dome. The lack of limits invites every possible identity, and none can stay. Freedom was meant to lift the soul, but without a foundation, it scatters the spirit across too many skies. What was once a dream becomes a burden carried in silence. The path forward is chosen not by desire, but by exhaustion. The narrowing happens not by clarity, but by collapse. The abundance becomes scarcity by its own magnitude. The irony lives in the core. The more one can do, the less one can be. The more one can have, the less one can hold. Freedom, unchecked, folds into its opposite. The trap is not made of bars. It is made of options. The miscommunication age. Words travel faster than thought, and meaning arrives last. In an era obsessed with expression, understanding dissolves. Messages multiply while comprehension vanishes. The signal is global, but the noise is deafening. Miscommunication thrives not in silence, but in saturation. Everything is said, and nothing is heard. Language is everywhere, and meaning is nowhere. Texts fly through fiber optics. Comments flood timelines. Captions reframe photos, and replies distort intent. Clarity loses its place in a world where reaction outruns reflection. Interpretation is immediate, and misinterpretation is inevitable. No pause exists between message and meaning. Every sentence can be reshaped, screenshotted, recontextualized. Tone cannot be transmitted. Emotion is reduced to symbols, feelings to filters. The most connected age in history becomes the most confused. Everyone speaks, no one listens, and all assume understanding. The more is communicated, the more is misunderstood. Precision becomes an antique. Nuance is a casualty. Speed is the new virtue, and speed tramples clarity. Thought is sacrificed on the altar of immediacy. In the race to be heard, truth is mangled in the crowd. Every message is filtered through bias, expectation, and assumption before it ever meets the ear or eye. In this age, platforms are louder than people. The medium reshapes the message. A tweet trims complexity into fragments. A post is judged by its engagement, not its insight. Words are weapons, or they are ignored. Subtlety drowns in virality. Communication becomes spectacle. Argument becomes entertainment. Explanation becomes apology. Silence used to mean contemplation. Now it signals guilt. Delay means defensiveness. Agreement means alignment, not understanding. Words are dissected, reassembled, weaponized. The intent behind them becomes irrelevant. Clarity is no longer sought, only evidence. The more is said, the more fuel is added to confusion. Apologies are demanded, but rarely accepted. Clarifications are viewed as weakness. Revisions are seen as surrender. Conversation becomes performance. Dialogue becomes debate. The goal is not to understand, but to dominate. The prize is not resolution, but reaction. Miscommunication is not an accident. It is a feature. Even intimacy falters. Loved ones misread tone. Friends interpret silence as distance. Partners fall into gaps created not by lack of care, but by overabundance of noise. In trying to stay in touch, distance increases. The tools designed to keep connection alive fracture it with constant interruption. Algorithms amplify miscommunication. Outrage spreads faster than nuance. Disagreement becomes identity. Complex ideas are flattened into slogans. Minds close even as eyes remain glued to screens. The problem isn't that no one is speaking. It's that everyone is speaking at once, and meaning is crushed beneath the volume. Technology bridges oceans, but widens divides. It connects faces and separates minds. A message is read instantly, but the meaning takes a lifetime to unravel, if it ever does. Filters and formatting promise clarity, but deliver confusion. Emojis try to do the work of eyes, but fall short. Sarcasm is invisible. Irony collapses. Humor turns to harm. Miscommunication is not just between people. It lives within individuals. Thought becomes jumbled as attention fragments. Sentences form before ideas finish. Minds chase meaning through fog, created by too much information. The more is known, the less can be expressed. Vocabulary expands, while understanding shrinks. In seeking to say everything, clarity is lost. In trying to be heard, connection slips away. The age of communication becomes the age of echo. Every message is reflected back louder, distorted, and more divisive. What was once a bridge becomes a mirror maze. Everyone sees a version of themselves, and no one sees the other. Miscommunication thrives in the assumption of clarity. The problem isn't lack of language. It's the surplus of certainty. Words are hurled like arrows. Intent is presumed. Understanding is skipped. Reaction is king. And when clarification arrives, it's already too late. The damage has been done by a sentence, never meant to harm. Even truth falters. Facts become fluid. Context is cropped. Excerpts replace evidence. Screenshots become scripture. Testimony is traded for trends. The noise outpaces the source. The correction never reaches as far as the confusion. A misquote travels farther than a library. What began as a dream of global dialogue ends as a cacophony. The ability to say anything becomes the impossibility of hearing something. Miscommunication is no longer a risk. It is the default. Clarity takes work, but noise is free. And in a world that chooses speed over sense, noise wins. The irony remains sharp. The more language is used, the less meaning survives. The more words are shared, the less is felt. The more tools exist to connect, the more disconnected everything becomes. The miscommunication age does not lack for voices. It drowns in them. The less sleep, the less time saved. Time is borrowed from the body, and the body always collects. Hours are carved from the night, offered to deadlines, to hustle, to ambition. Sleep becomes optional, a luxury carved away by alarms and screens and caffeine. Rest is delayed in the name of productivity, and the promise is always the same. More time, more progress, more life. But the account runs dry, and interest compounds. The more is gained in hours, the more is lost in clarity. The less sleep is taken, the less time is truly saved. Sleep is traded for output, but the exchange rate is broken. Every skipped hour creates a deficit not marked on calendars. The minutes gained after midnight erode the morning. Tasks stretch longer when the mind is tired. Mistakes multiply. Focus slips. Decisions wobble. A tired brain tries to work faster and move slower. The race against time is run on legs made of fog. The logic feels flawless. Work late, rise early, fit more into a day. But the days blur together. Memory frays. Attention flickers. Tasks completed in a haze require repeating. Energy drops. Caffeine spikes. Emotions flatten. A single missed night turns into a pattern. The body adjusts by falling apart slowly. Efficiency becomes exhaustion with better branding. The mind, once sharp, turns brittle. Words come slower. Emotions swing wider. The smallest setback expands to catastrophe. Confidence fades. Ideas lose their shape. What could have taken one rested hour takes 3 fatigued ones. More time is stolen from sleep, but the work takes longer to complete. Deadlines multiply. Mistakes compound. The time saved vanishes into the effort needed to undo what exhaustion built. Sleep is not lost. It is postponed, and when it returns, it comes with interest. Burnout is not the result of too much work. It's the outcome of too little restoration. Rest becomes recovery instead of prevention. The body collapses not because it was weak, but because it wasn't allowed to rebuild. And when rest finally arrives, it's no longer a choice. It's a shutdown. Every moment of alertness is built on the back of silence. Every great decision rises from rest. Sleep is the soil of stability. Strip it away, and the structure sways. But the paradox insists otherwise. Culture rewards the grind, praises the sleepless, admires those who never pause. Exhaustion becomes a trophy. Tiredness is celebrated. The more is denied sleep, the more applause is received. The less is rested, the more is respected. The world glows at night. Screens hum. Schedules spill into the dark. Lights burn past midnight. Productivity tools run on autopilot. Nights become battlegrounds for ambition. But in the absence of sleep, even victories feel hollow. Achievements are remembered in fragments. Wins are dulled by fatigue. The late-night breakthrough feels brilliant, until the morning reveals the error in the logic. The clarity of a rested mind cannot be manufactured by force. Sleep debt doesn't ask permission. It accrues. It grows silently, like mold in corners. Skipped nights become restless moods. Decisions degrade. Health declines. Emotion becomes raw, easily tipped. Sleep holds the switch between chaos and calm. It rebuilds what the day breaks. Without it, everything breaks a little more. The myth of the time thief hides in plain sight. The belief that sleep steals time when it is the only thing that gives it back. Every hour of rest adds speed to thought, strength to emotion, resilience to stress. Without it, the brain rewrites itself in confusion. The system overloads. The schedule collapses under its own impossible weight. Even joy fades. Laughter takes more effort. Moments pass without presence. The fog doesn't just steal productivity, it steals living. Sleep is the pause between breaths, the space that allows the rest of life to happen. But in the chase to gain time, sleep is treated as the obstacle. And so, time disappears. The less sleep is taken, the more life turns into a waking dream. But not the kind filled with wonder. The kind where nothing makes sense, and everything feels a step removed. The room is familiar, but the feeling is not. Life is technically happening, but it isn't being lived. Everything is half lit, half heard, half processed. Sleep doesn't just rest the body, it completes the day. Without it, the day remains unfinished. The paradox finishes the loop. The less sleep is allowed, the less time is gained. Work expands to fill the fog. Mistakes are made and must be corrected. Energy dips and must be fueled artificially. Productivity slows, and when it stops entirely, rest becomes recovery instead of rhythm. The schedule collapses inward. The promise of getting ahead turns into falling behind, more exhausted than before. The time was never saved. It was borrowed from a future that will demand it back. The closer the world gets, the further it feels. Distances collapse and hearts drift. Oceans shrink beneath fiber optic threads. Languages translate themselves. Video calls travel across time zones. Cultures blend. Timelines overlap. Information crosses continents in milliseconds. The world fits into a pocket, but meaning slips through the seams. Everyone is reachable, and no one feels close. The Earth has become a neighborhood without neighbors. Connections span continents, but lack contact. The screen brings faces near, but not presence. Globalization was supposed to unite, but the closer the world gets, the more distant it seems. Time zones blur, and understanding becomes more alien. The more is seen of other places, the more foreign they feel. Technology bridges space, but it doesn't bridge meaning. Cultures are accessible, but misunderstood. Headlines shout about global unity, while streets grow more divided. What was once distant is now visible. But visibility isn't the same as intimacy. The image of closeness replaces the experience of it. The connection is constant, but the warmth is gone. Travel is easier, but wanderlust grows stronger. Cities start to look the same. Cultures blend into branding. Accents are softened, and authenticity becomes content. The idea of the world is always present, and the soul of it is absent. Home is everywhere, so home becomes nowhere. Belonging fades as boundaries blur. The more global things become, the more alienated everything feels. Communication expands, and miscommunication multiplies. Cultures rub against each other through hashtags and headlines, and sparks fly. Familiarity breeds contempt, not compassion. Every place becomes another lens to argue through. Traditions are flattened into aesthetics. Local meaning gets packaged for international consumption. The more that is shared, the less that is sacred. The neighborhood cafe serves coffee from 3 continents, but no one knows the person behind the counter. The meeting includes voices from 5 countries, but no one knows how each other lives. Faces flicker on screens, and messages scroll, but the pulse of place, the heartbeat of shared reality, gets lost. Global reach becomes personal void. Time accelerates across borders. News travels faster than thought. A crisis erupts on one side of the globe and is reacted to on the other before it is understood. Awareness outpaces comprehension. Response replaces reflection. Everyone has access, and no one has context. The world shrinks, and understanding stretches thin. Culture was once inherited. Now it's streamed. Identity becomes playlisted. Traditions are curated for the feed. Global exposure becomes surface-level adoption. The soul of a people is replaced by a trend. The closer everything becomes, the harder it is to feel rooted. The world touches fingertips, but doesn't reach the heart. Even empathy shifts. Tragedy becomes a scrollable moment. Compassion becomes a performance. The more is seen, the less is felt. Suffering, joy, beauty, all become passing images. Global closeness turns pain into content, and the reaction becomes more important than the experience. The closer the world appears, the further it drifts emotionally. The paradox intensifies. The more is connected, the lonelier everything becomes. Old places feel unfamiliar. The town square is online now. The church, the temple, the family dinner, all digitized, all dispersed. Community becomes network, and network becomes noise. The sense of place dissolves, and the heart floats in a global fog. The more people are encountered, the less is shared. Language is translated, but intention is not. Humor travels poorly. Pain is mistranslated. Love is filtered. The soul of communication slips out in the global translation. And in this flood of connection, isolation deepens. The world gets closer, but the feeling of belonging drifts further away. No one is truly foreign anymore, but no one feels fully known either. Borders fade, and meaning blurs. Roots are replaced by reach. Cultures merge into confusion. Voices overlap until the chorus becomes a murmur. Global awareness becomes emotional detachment. The celebration of closeness ends in quiet alienation. The world was stitched together with data and dreams. It responded by unraveling intimacy. Now, every place can be visited virtually, but few are truly known. Every face can be called, but few are truly felt. And the more the globe spins in unison, the less steady the ground beneath becomes. Closeness was meant to unify, but without depth, proximity only magnifies distance. The closer the world gets, the further it feels. The expertise that can't keep up. Knowledge once stood as a mountain, climbed over years, marked by slow ascent and sacred rituals of mastery. Now the mountain moves. The path changes mid-climb. What was once expert insight becomes outdated opinion before the ink dries. The world accelerates, and expertise chases its own tail. The more is learned, the less is known. The deeper one digs, the more unstable the ground becomes. Experience was once the currency of trust. Now, it's the shadow of irrelevance. A lifetime of study is no match for a week of innovation. Technology renders training obsolete before the next class begins. The expert speaks, and the world shrugs. The student knows newer tools. The master clutches theories that the system has already replaced. The faster knowledge evolves, the slower mastery feels. The paradox sharpens. To become an expert is to know just enough to watch everything change. Depth is no longer armor. It's a weight. Specialization narrows perspective while the landscape shifts sideways. The time invested becomes a sunk cost in a system that worships the novel over the proven. Certification fades behind adaptability. Tradition bows to iteration. The more one knows, the more trapped that knowledge becomes. Fields that once required decades of apprenticeship now pivot in months. Algorithms rewrite industries. Platforms collapse and reemerge. One language is mastered while another replaces it. One system is perfected as a new one renders it useless. The authority of the expert melts in the heat of endless updates. Knowledge is no longer a destination. It's a moving target. Staying current demands letting go of what was once definitive. Every tool must be relearned. Every truth is temporary. The very concept of mastery fractures under the pressure of velocity. Learning becomes unlearning. The longer one knows something, the more likely it is that the world has moved past it. The badge of expertise becomes a symbol of resistance, not relevance. The expert must be a beginner endlessly, but the beginner has the advantage of naivety. The expert must forget with intention, must dismantle their own framework before the system does it for them. Wisdom once meant stability. Now it means flexibility. But flexibility without foundation can become disorientation. The paradox grows crueler. The more one knows, the harder it becomes to change. Deep knowledge resists adaptation. Assumptions crystallize. The brain, trained in systems, becomes reluctant to rebuild from scratch. The expert becomes the last to adjust. The curse of mastery is comfort in a method that no longer applies. Authority becomes inertia. Confidence becomes a trap. And yet, the world demands both brilliance and speed. The expert must not only know, but relearn faster than ever. Depth must be balanced with agility. But the deeper the knowledge, the longer it takes to reshape. The expert becomes a lighthouse in a world of flying ships, anchored, illuminating, but unmoving, revered, but often avoided. Innovation doesn't wait for consensus. It thrives in disruption. The crowd races toward what's next, while the expert tries to translate what was. The marketplace of ideas favors the loud, not the learned. Visibility replaces credibility. Speed replaces rigor. The expert warns, but the trend surges ahead. The expert explains, but the meme has already framed the issue in 1,000 reposts. The faster the system changes, the more the expert is punished for careful thought. Caution appears as hesitation, analysis as delay. Nuance becomes liability, and so the expert faces a cruel choice. Simplify or be silenced. Speak louder or be unheard. Abandon complexity or risk irrelevance. The world moves too quickly for footnotes. Even when right, the expert is wrong, because by the time the truth arrives, the world has moved on. Wisdom lands late. Insight lags behind virality. And so, expertise becomes a silent echo in a deafening storm. Revered in ceremony, ignored in urgency. Consulted after the damage, never before. The tragedy of mastery is that it requires time, and time no longer belongs to anyone. Everything now is in flux. Institutions crumble, traditions erode, roles dissolve. The expert watches the ladder they climbed turn to vapor. What once defined them now defies them. They become the last to know that the thing they mastered is no longer the thing that matters. But the paradox is not merely punishment. It is a reflection. True expertise now lies not in what is known, but in how quickly one can let go of what used to be known. Mastery has become a skill of shedding. The expert who thrives is the one who remembers that knowledge was always temporary, that authority was always rented. And yet, the discomfort remains. The mind that was trained to solidify must now evaporate. The ego built on certainty must now dissolve. The reward for knowledge is the recognition that knowledge cannot be held. The reward for mastery is the privilege of constant humility. The expert survives by becoming the eternal student. In this world, expertise is both an anchor and a parachute. It holds fast and weighs down. It guides and it limits. And the only way to remain wise is to be willing to forget and to begin again. The comfortable life that breeds anxiety. Softness surrounds and still the heart races. The walls are padded, the seat is ergonomic, the coffee is delivered on schedule, and the temperature is always just right. And yet, the mind spins. The body tenses. The threat never arrives, but the alarm rings anyway. Comfort was supposed to bring peace. Instead, it incubates worry. The safer the life becomes, the louder the fear grows. The paradox whispers in every smooth corner. The more protected the world feels, the more fragile the self becomes. With every threat removed, the sense of danger heightens. Risk is no longer external. It is internal. The enemy is not the environment, but the imagination. An idle mind becomes a theater for catastrophe, and comfort gives it all the time it needs to perform. Convenience dulls friction, but friction shaped resilience. Without challenge, the system forgets how to regulate. Muscles atrophy when never stretched. The nervous system, underused, rewires itself to interpret silence as danger. Every pause becomes suspicion. Every still moment feels like a trap. The body, prepared for chaos, has nowhere to send the energy. Anxiety fills the space where struggle used to be. The paradox sharpens. The easier the life, the harder the mind works to find something wrong. The brain evolved to survive threats, and without them, it invents them. A minor disagreement becomes betrayal. A delayed message becomes rejection. A single symptom becomes a diagnosis. The less there is to fear, the more fear multiplies. The shelter becomes a stimulus. The couch becomes a cage. The thermostat is perfect, but the nervous system runs hot. The lights dim automatically, but the mind doesn't follow. External peace doesn't penetrate internal unrest. Even in rest, tension remains. The body expects chaos and is confused by calm. Safety becomes discomfort when it's never tested. Everything is available, but satisfaction remains elusive. The phone delivers every answer, but meaning slips further away. Comfort promises rest, but demands vigilance. Even joy becomes performance. Even peace requires justification. The fear of losing comfort becomes more stressful than discomfort ever was. The comfort zone becomes a prison dressed as luxury. The day flows without effort, and that becomes the problem. There's no achievement in ease, no triumph in the unearned. Without struggle, the self feels hollow. Without friction, identity doesn't take shape. So anxiety fills the gap, offering something to fight, something to resolve. The battle is imagined, but the cortisol is real. Even the culture reflects the contradiction. Mental health awareness rises alongside record anxiety levels. Self-care becomes an industry. The pursuit of comfort becomes a performance of wellness. The more people try to feel better, the worse they feel about not feeling better. The tools multiply, and still the void echoes. Comfort breeds comparison. The mind asks, why isn't this enough, when everything looks perfect? If the conditions are ideal, then the flaw must be internal. The anxiety turns inward. In a harsh world, fear is external. In a soft world, fear becomes self. Blame replaces environment with identity. And so the anxiety spirals without a clear enemy. The contradiction deepens. The more people are told they're okay, the more they suspect they're not. Affirmation becomes doubt. The endless focus on well-being begins to feel like a warning. If everyone's talking about peace, danger must be near. If life is this comfortable, why does the mind hurt? The very presence of comfort becomes suspicious. There's no preparation for real discomfort. And so, minor obstacles feel monumental. Waiting becomes panic. Boredom becomes despair. Silence becomes shouting. Without practiced resilience, every ripple feels like drowning. Growth used to be forged through hardship. Now it must emerge in environments that avoid it. Anxiety becomes the signal that something important is missing. And still, the comfort increases. Homes become smarter. Devices anticipate needs. Services arrive instantly. The rough edges vanish, and the soul reaches for friction. The animal inside wants challenge, wants struggle, wants reality. But all it gets is content, temperature control, and prepackaged serenity. So it turns inward. It tears at the mind. The claws that once fought to survive now scratch the walls of a perfect room. Anxiety doesn't come despite comfort. It comes because of it. Because comfort isolates. Because ease erases the rituals of endurance. Because when everything is designed to feel good, anything that doesn't becomes unbearable. Comfort was meant to heal, but overprescribed, it numbs. And numbness isn't peace. It's confusion, wearing a soft robe. The life protected from pain becomes the life vulnerable to everything. And the more is shielded from hardship, the more hardship invades the psyche. Not from outside, but from within. The comfortable life doesn't silence anxiety. It gives it room to speak louder. And louder. Until that's all that can be heard. The watching eye that can't protect. Every movement tracked, every step recorded, every face scanned. The eye watches from above and within. Security cameras blink on every corner. Satellites orbit with quiet authority. Smartphones track location even while asleep. The world is surveilled into submission. Protection is promised, but always just out of reach. The more the eye sees, the less it prevents. The more that is known, the less that is understood. Surveillance swells, and safety remains elusive. The logic is airtight. Watch more, stop more. Record everything, miss nothing. But the results don't follow. Crimes happen on camera. Injustice unfolds in high definition. The lens captures the act, but cannot intervene. The eye observes the fall, but cannot offer a hand. Technology sees everything and touches nothing. Protection becomes presence without power. Fear justifies the gaze. Safety demands visibility. The unseen is dangerous. The unknown is unacceptable. So the lights stay on. The feed stays live. The watchers watch, but the danger adapts. The system doesn't fail to see. It fails to act. Footage piles high. Proof collects in terabytes. And still harm unfolds in real time. The eye is sharp, but the will is dulled. Every public square, every private message, every casual glance becomes part of the archive. Data flows like blood through unseen wires. Everything is accessible to someone, somewhere. And yet, when it matters, when the harm is imminent, the footage is reviewed after the fact. Protection is always retrospective. Surveillance is memory, not defense. The paradox is clear and cruel. The more is watched, the less is prevented. Awareness increases, intervention decreases. The illusion of control expands, while vulnerability deepens. Lives unfold beneath 1,000 eyes, and still the danger arrives unannounced. Cameras do not shield. Databases do not deter. The record is not a shield. It is a tombstone of inaction. Even safety becomes a performance. Presence of cameras provides a false sense of order. Crime happens elsewhere, until it doesn't. Trust is outsourced to the system, and the system delays. When intervention comes, it is delayed, automated, impersonal. The watching eye sees the moment of violence, the instant of danger, the cry for help, but always from the outside. Control grows tighter, yet anxiety rises. The more is surveilled, the more is feared. Every glance becomes suspicion, every word a potential threat. Privacy collapses under the weight of prevention, and still nothing feels safe. The observer becomes the threat. The line between guardian and captor dissolves. Privacy dies quietly, first in airports, then in streets, then in homes. Convenience becomes the entry point. Devices are welcomed, then listened to. Voices are stored, habits tracked. All in the name of peace. All in the shadow of control. And still, harm walks in unnoticed. The house is watched, but the heart is unguarded. The world bends around visibility. Darkness is punished. Silence is suspect. The unseen becomes the enemy. But the real threat hides in plain sight. Inside systems, inside institutions, inside expectations. The eye can't protect against what it is told not to see. The system sees what it is trained to notice, and ignores what doesn't fit. Even truth is compromised. Footage can be cut. Angles can be chosen. The lens is not neutral. The eye belongs to someone, serves someone, edits for someone. What is captured becomes narrative, not evidence. Surveillance turns into storytelling. Safety becomes selective. Justice becomes filtered. The more is seen, the more is manipulated. The camera points outward, never inward. Those behind the screen remain untouched. The watcher is not watched. The gaze flows one way. Accountability becomes asymmetric. Transparency exists for the watched, not the watcher. The system is blind to itself. Surveillance expands, but protection remains scarce. The eye cannot intervene, cannot empathize, cannot understand. It collects. It archives. It moves on. The harm has already happened. The damage is already done. The camera keeps rolling, and the watched keep wondering, if everything is seen, why does nothing stop? The watching eye doesn't blink, but it doesn't protect either. The loud silence of the internet. The volume is deafening. Posts echo through timelines. Comments surge like tides. Opinions collide in endless streams of content. Noise floods every corner of the digital landscape. And beneath it all, a silence grows. Dense, heavy, unspoken. The internet talks constantly and says nothing. Words multiply. Meaning evaporates. The louder it gets, the less is truly heard. Voices are everywhere. Shouting into the void has become daily ritual. Megaphones are given to anyone, yet connection rarely follows. Everyone speaks, and no one listens. The performance of expression replaces the experience of communication. Replies come instantly, but not thoughtfully. Engagement is rewarded. Understanding is irrelevant. The platform thrives on noise, not dialogue. Truth becomes fragmented, scattered across memes, clipped quotes, headlines that outshine their stories. Everything is said in bold, but nothing is spoken in full. The sound is constant, but no echo returns. The louder it gets, the more isolated each voice becomes. Speech becomes content, not contact. The crowd grows larger, and the loneliness grows louder. Silence doesn't mean absence, it means irrelevance. A voice not posting is a voice forgotten. To exist online is to contribute to the noise. Stillness is suspicious. Quiet is punished by algorithms. So the performance continues. The silence behind the noise grows deeper. Thoughts remain unshared. Emotions go unspoken. Complexity is filtered out. The loudness covers what no one dares to reveal. The paradox screams, endless conversation, no communion, infinite replies, no resolution. All the tools to connect, yet nothing to hold. Comments flood. Empathy drowns. Likes replace listening. Shares replace understanding. And in this blizzard of interaction, the soul retreats. The words are there. The voice is missing. Even connection becomes performance. Vulnerability becomes strategy. Pain becomes engagement. Authenticity is curated. Every confession is polished. Every outburst is packaged. The voice behind the post grows distant. The real silence is in what cannot be said, what cannot be liked, what cannot trend. And the louder the room gets, the more fragile the signal becomes. Ideas are flattened into slogans. Feelings are reduced to hashtags. The self is compressed to fit the feed. And in this compression, something vital slips away. The silence isn't from lack of expression. It's from too much noise crushing expression's meaning. Scrolling becomes a trance. Awareness fades. Thousands of voices pass like blinking lights. Attention is split, then shattered. The mind can't hold the weight of so many opinions, so it stops processing them. Numbness sets in. A scream in a crowded room gets no response. A whisper can't compete. The silence of the soul grows while the content keeps playing. Even outrage becomes a script. Reactions are predictable. Outrage cycles replace news cycles. A storm erupts, dies down, and another begins. Each louder than the last, each emptier. The repetition becomes background noise. Passion turns to performance. Protest turns to posturing. Silence becomes the only authentic response. And even that is framed as guilt. The loudness offers comfort. It distracts from reflection. It fills the space where uncertainty might ask hard questions. But the cost is presence. The cost is clarity. Attention becomes noise. Awareness becomes distraction. And in all of it, the real voice hides. Not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. What was meant to connect ends up crowding. The digital city has no quiet corners. The library has no reading rooms. The conversation has no pauses. Everything speaks. Nothing listens. And behind the flood of speech, a silence deepens. A silence not of absence, but of abandonment. The internet talks constantly, but real voices, the ones that tremble, the ones that wonder, the ones that hesitate, go unheard. They are buried under volume, buried under speed, buried under relevance. The silence isn't an accident. It's a symptom. The loud silence of the internet is not the absence of sound. It's the absence of space for anything real to land. The cloud that forgets everything. Everything is saved. Nothing is remembered. Photos fill folders, named by dates no one can recall. Messages remain archived, but the feelings behind them have evaporated. The cloud promises eternal memory, yet memory itself dissolves. Every moment is captured, and none are held. The past is preserved in pixels, but the connection to it grows dimmer by the day. There is no longer any need to remember, and so remembering becomes a forgotten skill. Names are stored in contacts, not minds. Directions are dictated by satellites. Birthdays are announced by devices. Memory becomes metadata. Intimacy turns into autofill. The more the cloud remembers, the less the mind needs to. And so it doesn't. What was once sacred is now searchable. The box of old letters has been replaced by inbox folders. The smell of aged paper is gone. The handwriting is gone. The moment is reduced to a timestamp. Memory becomes indexed, not felt. Events become documentation. The cloud is full, but the heart is empty. Everything is available, and nothing is known. The paradox forms. The more is saved, the less can be found. Data piles up. Thousands of photos from vacations no one talks about. Screenshots of moments no one relives. The archive becomes noise. Information becomes white static. The cloud stores it all, but the essence leaks away. Access increases. Attachment vanishes. The act of remembering used to require effort. Now it requires storage space. Stories used to be shaped by what could be recalled. Now they're overwritten by what was recorded. Memory once filtered experience, giving it shape. Now everything is kept, and nothing is curated. The narrative is lost in the flood. Time loses weight when it's backed up nightly. The past is always within reach, and yet further than ever. Nostalgia becomes lazy. Reflection becomes redundant. When everything is remembered for you, the soul stops participating. The past becomes passive. The cloud doesn't forget, but the person does. Even grief is altered. Once, memory preserved the dead. Now the cloud collects them. Voices remain on old voicemails. Laughter lingers in videos. Profiles continue after life ends. The archive continues to breathe while the memory of presence fades. Loss becomes surreal. Memory used to be a sacred act. Now it's an automatic sync. The line between remembering and recording fades. Children's first steps, proposals, final words, all captured through a lens. The moment is witnessed twice, once as it happens, once through playback. But something is lost in the split. Presence is traded for posterity. Experience is split between living it and saving it. The cloud gains another file. The moment becomes another notification. The safety of the cloud becomes the reason memory becomes careless. The mind no longer holds birthdays, recipes, poems, directions, dreams. They are all uploaded. The brain becomes a search engine with no soul. Remembering requires meaning. Storage requires none. So, the cloud grows, and memory shrinks. Even identity fragments. Passwords are remembered by machines. Preferences are remembered by platforms. The self becomes a profile, a string of remembered behavior patterns. And yet, identity feels unstable. The more the system remembers, the more the person forgets who they are without it. The paradox deepens. Nothing is ever truly lost, and still, everything feels gone. The message is retrievable, but the feeling behind it is not. The photo is accessible, but the scent in the air, the sound of laughter, the weight of the moment, all gone. The past is documented, but it is not alive. And so, the cloud becomes a monument to memory that can't be touched, a museum of moments that once meant everything and now mean little. The promise was eternal memory. What it delivered was permanent forgetting, not because it erased, but because it saved too much. The cloud doesn't forget anything, and that's exactly why memory is vanishing. The jobs that automation killed. The machine was built to help, and so it took over. First, the simple tasks: filing, sorting, calculating. Then, the complex ones: driving, translating, analyzing. What was once science fiction became process optimization. The dream was freedom from labor. The result was labor without a place to go. Automation entered quietly, promising relief. No more backbreaking work. No more dangerous shifts. Let the machine handle it. Let the system run it. And the people would be free to do more meaningful things. But the meaningful things never arrived. They were already being automated too. The paradox settles in. The more is made efficient, the less is left to do. Tasks disappear. Professions vanish. Skills lose value. The faster machines learn, the faster workers become obsolete. The job isn't lost to incompetence. It's lost to perfection. The algorithm doesn't sleep, doesn't complain, doesn't make mistakes. The job that took a lifetime to master is done in seconds by code. And with every task the machine assumes, another sense of purpose slips away. Work was more than income. It was rhythm, identity, social structure. Without it, time becomes unanchored. Days stretch, meaning thins. Freedom turns to aimlessness. Leisure turns to anxiety. The promise of rest becomes the prison of redundancy. Even creative fields shake. Art, music, writing, once the last bastions of humanity, now face AI-generated competition. The spark of originality is shadowed by prediction engines. What once required soul can now be simulated. The human touch is no longer unique. It is optional. The machine doesn't kill jobs with malice. It does so with precision. The system does what it's told, more accurately, more affordably, more consistently. Business thrives, profit rises, productivity soars, and the human is left wondering what role remains. The system is optimized. The soul is not. Every advance in automation raises the same question. What is the human for? Not survival. Machines grow the food. Not transportation. Machines drive the cars. Not communication. Machines translate and summarize. The answer used to be, humans are for thinking, for feeling, for dreaming. But even those are being modeled now. The contradiction expands. The more tools are created to free humanity, the more humanity becomes displaced by its tools. The more is built, the less is needed. The machine that lifts the burden also removes the reason to carry it. And what is a burdenless existence without a purpose? Even dignity shifts. Where once a job gave structure, now absence breeds shame. Worth was once tied to contribution. And contribution was defined by labor. Remove the labor and self-worth phrase. The job disappears, and the identity follows. The machine never meant to erase the person, but it did. Retraining becomes the bandage. Learn to code, adapt, reskill. But the speed of change outpaces the capacity to respond. The new skill of today is outdated by next quarter. The job market becomes a treadmill set to sprint. Only those already ahead stay on it. Everyone else is thrown off. Work once anchored communities. Towns rose around industries. Families were built around trades. Now, industries are uprooted overnight. Plants close. Stores digitize. Warehouses fill with robots. Trucks drive themselves. And towns fall silent. The machine doesn't just replace a task, it replaces a culture. But the final paradox is not that the job is gone. It's that the person remains. Still capable, still creative, still alive, but left outside the system designed to exclude inefficiency. The machine doesn't see the human. It sees the variable. And, if the variable doesn't optimize, it is removed. And so, the age of automation promises a golden future, but delivers a question with no clear answer. When everything runs without hands, where do the hands go? When intelligence is artificial and flawless, where does flawed brilliance belong? The job wasn't just a job. It was the rhythm of the week, the reason to wake, the sense of direction. Automation erased the task, but the emptiness it left behind was never programmed to be filled. The future is efficient, but the soul wasn't built for efficiency. The health crisis in a world of diets. The shelves are filled with answers. Low carb, high fat, sugar-free, keto, paleo, plant-based, raw, organic, gluten-free, intermittent fasting. Solutions for every possible ailment, every dream body, every lifespan goal. Knowledge has never been more abundant. Guidelines are everywhere. Experts disagree in high definition. Recipes are algorithmically tailored. The secrets are no longer secret. And still, the health crisis grows. The paradox sharpens. The more is known about how to live, the less is done to live that way. Never before have so many ways existed to be healthy, and never before have the bodies carrying that knowledge been so burdened. Obesity rates climb. Chronic illnesses rise. Burnout is normalized. The numbers move in one direction, and the information in another. Every method is available, every resource accessible. The answer is known. The behavior remains unchanged. The mind digests more information than the body ever could food. Every scroll reveals a new rule. Carbs are villains. Fats are saviors. Then the reverse. Fruit is medicine, then poison. Coffee heals, then harms, then heals again. Confusion masquerades as abundance. The more choices are given, the more paralysis sets in. Health becomes a maze disguised as a menu. Diets are designed to fix the problem. They end up designing the problem. Restriction breeds obsession. Labeling food as evil gives it power. Every bite becomes a negotiation. Hunger becomes a test. Eating becomes math. The joy of nourishment is replaced with the guilt of deviation. The paradox feeds itself. The attempt to control the body creates the very stress that damages it. The industry blooms in the soil of insecurity. Health becomes commerce. Food becomes product. Supplements fill the gaps created by marketing. Calories are no longer units of energy. They are sins or virtues. Identity is shaped around what can and can't be eaten. The more one tries to eat right, the more wrong it feels to enjoy anything at all. The science is clear. The behavior is cloudy. Knowing what to do doesn't translate to doing it. The mind and body are flooded with knowledge, yet starved of consistency. Willpower is glorified, but never explained. The question is not what to eat. It's why the eating doesn't match the knowing. The health crisis is not from lack of advice. It's from an overdose of it. Even the body is confused. Starved of rhythm, bombarded by contradictory cues, It loses trust in its own signals. Hunger is ignored, then binged. Fullness is misread. The natural wisdom of appetite is drowned beneath charts and plans. The body speaks softly, but the world shouts louder. And the body forgets how to respond. Health becomes performance. Meals are shared for approval, not satiety. Progress is measured in public metrics. The scale becomes scripture. The mirror becomes courtroom. And when the body fails to meet its digital representation, the mind suffers. Health was meant to be healing. Instead, it becomes another form of pressure. The paradox deepens. The more is aimed for health, the more stress accumulates from the pursuit. Stress becomes chronic. Cortisol builds, sleep shortens, anxiety rises. The very tools used to fix the body begin to break it. Biohacking becomes self-punishment, dressed as optimization. The body becomes an enemy to tame, not a partner to understand. Healthcare thrives as sickness spreads. Prevention is preached but not practiced. Hospitals overflow while wellness trends explode. Medical bills rise as self-help books sell. The infrastructure of healthcare reacts but does not guide. Systemic causes are acknowledged, then ignored. The solution is always personal, never cultural. The blame rests with the individual, who is too overwhelmed to respond. Even community in health is eroded. Eating used to be social. Now it's strategic. Meals are no longer shared experiences, but tactical operations. Isolation becomes part of the plan. Fewer tables are sat around. More meals are eaten alone, accompanied by screens and silence. The food is calculated, but the connection is missing. The problem is not ignorance. It's disconnection. From the body, from community, from trust. The mind is full, and the body is empty. Hunger is not the enemy. Confusion is. In a world where everyone knows what to do, no one knows how to begin. And the health crisis thrives on the gap between understanding and action. The paradox holds steady. The more the world focuses on health, the sicker it feels. The more diets promise salvation, the more the soul craves escape. The solution is marketed in every aisle, and still nothing changes. The world doesn't need more diets. It needs less distance between knowing and doing, between living and eating, between care and body. And until that distance is closed, the world will remain overfed, undernourished, and painfully aware of it. The time saved that disappears anyway. Minutes are shaved like wood. Seconds are squeezed. Tasks are batched, optimized, outsourced. Time management becomes its own form of worship. Apps multiply. Notifications organize themselves. Calendars predict the future. Efficiency is everywhere. Productivity is maximized. And yet, time still slips away. The paradox is cruel. The more time is saved, the less of it is felt. A task that once took hours now takes minutes. Navigation is instant. Communication is immediate. Purchases are one click away. And yet, there is never enough time. The day ends unfinished. The list grows longer. The pressure intensifies. The savings vanish like vapor. Time is captured, and still it escapes. Efficiency was supposed to create space. Space for creativity, rest, joy. Instead, it creates opportunity for more work. One task ends, another begins. The saved time is immediately reinvested into more output. The machine never rests. The mind never stops. The clock is tamed, and still it bites. Even leisure becomes scheduled. Breaks are earned, not taken. Rest is timed. Recharging is efficient. Meditation is a productivity hack. The line between doing and being disappears. The body sits still, but the brain checks boxes. Free time feels like waste. Guilt replaces presence. Stillness is haunted by urgency. Automation accelerates everything. But acceleration doesn't feel like speed. It feels like pressure. Emails answered in half the time lead to twice as many emails. Instant response becomes expected. Delay becomes offense. Efficiency raises the bar, and satisfaction drops. Saving time once brought relief. Now it brings expectation. Technology promises to give time back. What it gives instead is fragmentation. Attention splits into pieces. Focus becomes rare. Presence is interrupted. Multitasking becomes the baseline. Nothing gets full attention. Everything is touched, but not held. The result is constant activity and lingering emptiness. Saved time isn't stored, it's spent. Not on rest, but on more obligation. The mental calendar fills itself. There is no return on time investment, only redistribution. The hours freed become the hours re-enslaved. The schedule is no longer a tool. It is the master. The clock has been optimized. The soul has been overclocked. Even conversation is optimized. Shortened replies, quick reactions, voice notes. Time is saved. Connection is lost. Words are fewer, meaning thins. The art of slowness dies. Everything happens fast, and nothing is remembered. The saved moment is missed in the process of saving it. The paradox deepens. The more time is protected, the less it is experienced. Moments are compressed. Days disappear. Weeks blend. The pace blurs detail. Time is measured, not lived. The obsession with saving time makes every second feel like currency, not memory. The body keeps time biologically, but biology has been overruled by systems. Sleep cycles are adjusted to match workload. Meals are skipped, crammed, automated. Exercise is tracked in data, not felt in breath. Even love is squeezed into time slots. The human clock is rewritten by the digital one, and something ancient is lost. The time saved was meant to create peace. It creates compression. What was once stretched and slow, meals, walks, talks, days, has become scheduled, narrow, packed. The space between things disappears. Reflection shrinks. Thought flattens. Insight is rushed. And in this speed, the mind feels left behind. Time saved doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like debt. Something else should be done. Something better. Something productive. The moment is not enough. The future is owed something. And so the present is never settled. The pace increases, and satisfaction diminishes. It's never fast enough. Never efficient enough. The solution is always more tools, more systems, more strategy. But the problem was never lack of tools. It was forgetting why the time was being saved in the first place. The machine runs smoothly, but it forgot what it was running toward. Time is saved, but meaning is lost. And so, the time saved disappears into itself, not because it vanished, but because it was never felt. Time is not just a number. It is an experience, and experience cannot be optimized without being erased. The nostalgia that arrives too early. Longing used to take time. It crept in through gaps, through silence, through the space between one life stage and the next. Memories fermented slowly. Decades were needed to soften the sharp edges of the past. Nostalgia arrived as a gentle ghost, only after forgetting had begun. Now, it arrives before the moment has even ended. The memory is still fresh, and the yearning has already begun. The paradox tightens. The closer the moment is, the more distant it feels. A photograph is taken while the event is still happening. A filter is applied before the feeling settles. A post is shared before the memory has weight. Nostalgia is no longer memory. It's performance. It's prepared in real time. Captions are written while emotions are still unfolding. The moment is archived before it is even lived. And so, the experience slips through unnoticed while the shadow of it is celebrated. The world races to remember what it hasn't even finished experiencing. People miss the now by anticipating the then. Summer ends on the first day of June. Songs become classics before they fade from playlists. Childhood is mourned while the toys are still in hand. Relationships are idealized before they end. Memory is preloaded with mourning. The present is a postcard in progress. The faster life is documented, the sooner it becomes something to miss. Time speeds up when it's watched too closely. Events unfold, but they are already echoes. Vacations are remembered more vividly in the planning stage than in the being there. Nostalgia becomes another form of consumption. Moments are devoured in anticipation of missing them. Nostalgia used to heal. It now interrupts. It does not wait for reflection. It injects itself into immediacy. Photos from yesterday prompt ache. Remember when refers to last month. Social media pulls the recent past into a carousel of longing. Memory is no longer selective. It's weaponized. Algorithms resurface old images not to preserve them, but to generate engagement. And so the timeline becomes a loop, not a progression. The paradox becomes louder. The more is remembered, the less is experienced. The mind becomes a museum for moments barely lived. The future is feared, the present is blurred, and the past is magnified. But the past was never allowed to settle. Nostalgia becomes a default, not a destination. A background hum of grief for things still within reach. Even the young are not spared. Teenagers write songs about the good old days. 20-somethings reminisce about high school, like it was a golden era. Nostalgia is no longer the privilege of age. It's the symptom of acceleration. Everything happens so fast that nothing feels present. Memory becomes instant replay, and the game is never played with full attention. This nostalgia is different. It lacks foundation. It's not about what was lost, but what was barely held. It's not about childhood play. It's about early internet culture, last year's trends, 2-week-old aesthetics. The gap between experience and remembrance shrinks to nothing. And with it, the joy of surprise, of evolution, of forgetting, dies. When everything is instantly remembered, nothing matures. Nostalgia used to be a reconciliation with the past. Now it's a retreat from the present, a refuge from overstimulation, a way to escape the relentless now by pretending the then had more clarity. But the then was just as confusing. It only feels better because the now is too crowded. So the mind reaches backward, not because the past was pure, but because the present is exhausted. The desire to miss something is now baked into the experience. Events are viewed as their own summaries. The moment is filtered through how it will be remembered. Living becomes acting. Sincerity is rehearsed. And memory is no longer organic. It's manufactured, packaged, sold. The past becomes hyper-real, cleaner than it was, neater, easier to grieve than the present is to endure. The mess of real life is edited out. The nostalgia arrives too early and brings with it a pressure to feel what hasn't been earned yet, to mourn what hasn't ended, to reminisce on what hasn't even been absorbed. And so, the now is abandoned in favor of the almost now. Life is lived through glass, not touched. And when the present does finally pass, it leaves no residue, only highlights, only glimpses, only curated versions. Nostalgia once helped heal the distance from what mattered. Now it creates the distance, and then pretends to bridge it. The moment was never given a chance to exist before it became something to miss. Nostalgia came early and stayed forever. The lie that outsprints the truth. The lie moves first. It doesn't wait for evidence. It doesn't pause for reflection. It doesn't check the source, the spelling, or the consequences. It runs, unburdened, straight into minds and headlines, viral before it can be caught. The truth, weighed down by complexity and verification, stumbles behind. The paradox reveals itself. The lie is fast because it doesn't care. The truth is slow because it does. Falsehoods are agile. They adapt. They entertain. They confirm what someone already wants to believe. The truth is complicated. It demands patience. It often disappoints. The lie leaps across networks in seconds. The truth crawls from peer review. One fits into a tweet. The other requires context. And attention spans aren't long enough to wait for accuracy. The internet doesn't just allow lies. It accelerates them. It rewards what spreads, not what's real. The more outrageous the story, the more engagement it garners. The system doesn't ask whether it's true. It asks whether it works. The lie always works faster. And by the time the truth responds, the damage is permanent. Even correction doesn't reach the places the lie has touched. Retractions are buried. Clarifications are ignored. People believe what they hear first. The initial impression writes itself into memory. The truth, arriving late, must fight for space that's already occupied. The race was rigged from the start. The lie doesn't need evidence. It borrows emotion. It wears the clothes of fear, anger, hope. It knows the buttons to press. The truth wears a lab coat and asks questions. The lie shouts. The truth asks. And the volume always wins. The lie doesn't explain. It declares. And declarations are easier to follow than details. Facts are heavy. Lies are light. The more data is provided, the more the audience tunes out. But the lie offers certainty. It packages confusion into conviction, and conviction is contagious. The lie offers relief from ambiguity. The truth offers more questions. And so, the lie becomes attractive not because it deceives, but because it simplifies. The world is complex. The lie trims it down, offers a clean villain, a simple fix, a neat story. The truth says it's not that easy, and no one wants to hear that. The lie comforts. The truth unsettles. Even those who know better can be caught. Repetition makes anything familiar. Familiarity feels true. The lie is repeated until it becomes background noise, then becomes belief. The truth, stated once, needs reinforcement. But it rarely gets it. The attention moved on. The narrative is already set. The paradox grows bitter. The more truth is available, the more lies thrive. Information abundance creates fatigue. People stop checking, stop questioning. Too much access creates apathy. And in that space, the lie dances. Not challenged, just accepted. Not proven, just preferred. Even when exposed, the lie doesn't die. It mutates, changes shape, appears again in new clothes. Conspiracy becomes culture. Misinformation becomes identity. People stop caring if it's true. They care if it feels true. The truth becomes an inconvenience. The lie becomes a lifestyle. And the more the truth tries to catch up, the more exhausted it becomes. The lie has already been shared, screenshotted, remixed. The truth begins its slow walk with footnotes and sources. The world is too loud to hear it arrive. This isn't about deception. It's about pace, about speed, about design. The system is built for momentum, not integrity. The incentives reward velocity, not verification. The lie flourishes because it plays by the rules of virality. The truth falters because it still believes in rules at all. And yet the truth does not vanish. It waits. It resurfaces. It endures. While the lie burns fast, the truth settles deep. Some still seek it. Some still hold it. But the race continues, over and over. The lie sprinting ahead, and the truth trying to catch its breath. Because the truth can win, but only if it's allowed to reach the finish line. The energy that destroys to save. Every watt promises a better world, a cleaner one, a smarter one, a future powered by light, not smoke, by wind, sun, lithium. Fossil fuels fade into shame. Renewable becomes sacred. Carbon footprints are counted like sins. The transition begins. Energy becomes the savior. And in its pursuit, destruction accelerates. The paradox flares. The world is saved by the very engines that threaten it. Solar panels glisten on rooftops, but their materials are mined from wounded earth. Wind turbines twirl gracefully, while their blades are buried in landfills. Electric cars hum down highways, powered by batteries that required poisoned rivers and child labor. Every solution comes wrapped in another consequence. The new energy is cleaner at the plug, but not at the source. The promise is clean. The process is not. Rare earths are not rare in theory, but accessing them demands violence. Forests are cleared for mining. Mountains are carved. Deserts are scraped. Oceans are disturbed. In the race to save the planet, ecosystems are treated like stepping stones. Nature is sacrificed for sustainability. The energy meant to preserve ends up consuming. The transition was supposed to be gentle. Instead, it's extractive. Fossil fuels dig deep. Clean energy digs wider. Lithium, cobalt, nickel. Minerals hidden beneath fragile communities, extracted by unstable governments, transported across continents, refined in smoke-belching factories. The cost is buried beneath green branding. Even the machines that produce the new energy demand immense energy to build. Solar factories are powered by coal. EV batteries are assembled by diesel trucks. Wind turbine blades stretch across highways fueled by oil. The infrastructure of the clean future rides on the back of the dirty past. The paradox intensifies. The world moves toward salvation by dragging its demons with it. Every green choice becomes a compromise. Recyclable, but shipped from halfway across the world. Carbon neutral, but made in a factory powered by coal. Off-grid, but built with materials mined by machines powered by fossil fuel. Guilt is swapped for pride, but the damage lingers. The illusion of sustainability becomes the new mask of consumption. Energy once meant survival. Now it means virtue. Choices become moral statements. But behind every clean product is a trail of invisible scars. The grid expands, but so does the damage. Dams displace people. Wind farms disrupt habitats. Solar fields consume fertile ground. Progress demands space, and space is taken, not found. The narrative stays optimistic. The future will be fixed by newer tech, greener tech, smarter tech, but every new solution demands new inputs. And those inputs come from the same earth, the same crust, the same broken contracts. The pattern repeats. Energy is needed to build the machines that promise to reduce energy use. Consumption increases to fight consumption. The clean future becomes an industrial one. Glass, steel, lithium, copper. More mining, more refining, more building. Fewer emissions per unit, but more units every day. The scale grows, the efficiency increases. And yet, emissions keep rising. The planet gets cleaner by becoming more exhausted. Even awareness doesn't break the cycle. Guilt is absorbed, not transformed. Offsetting becomes a transaction. Carbon credits are bought like indulgences. Trees are planted to balance out harm already done. The system gamifies destruction. Sustainability becomes branding. Energy remains the product. And the consumer is never questioned, only upgraded. The Earth isn't dying from a lack of clean energy. It's dying from too much of everything. Too much speed. Too much building. Too much extraction. Clean energy doesn't change the appetite. It changes the packaging. The world is still consumed, just more efficiently. The forest burns slower, but it still burns. The paradox tightens its grip. Energy is sought to save the world, and energy production ensures it cannot be saved. The desire to consume less is expressed by consuming more of something else. The hunger for power doesn't fade. It evolves. The lights stay on, and the planet dims. And so, energy becomes the answer and the problem, the solution and the threat. What saves also scars. What reduces harm creates new kinds of it. And the world races forward, powered by the hope that the next version of energy will finally break the cycle. Without realizing, The cycle is not in the energy. It's in the need. The constant contact that breaks connection. The phone is always within reach. The message is always possible. No call goes unanswered for long. No thought is left unsent. Notifications arrive before the silence settles. Responses are instant. And yet, something slips. The connection, so abundant, becomes fragile. The paradox grows clear. The more constant the contact, the weaker the connection feels. Words fly, but meaning drifts. Messages stack. Replies shorten. Communication multiplies, and understanding shrinks. Everyone is reachable, but no one feels reached. Availability replaces intimacy. A green dot signals presence, but not attention. A text is sent, but no conversation unfolds. Communication becomes maintenance, not connection. Even relationships begin to resemble subscriptions. Constant check-ins, constant updates, constant stream of content shared out of obligation rather than depth. The thread continues, but the soul detaches. Talk becomes task. Affection becomes emoji. Emotion becomes reaction. The signal is strong. The bond is not. The world is hyperlinked. Calendars sync. Time zones blur. Contact is never lost, and still connection dissolves. Presence once required being somewhere. Now it means appearing responsive. The illusion of closeness hides the absence of engagement. Messages are typed while walking, while eating, while half listening to another. The face glows. The mind drifts. Connection once required effort. Now it requires battery life. Intimacy used to grow in quiet, in time, in eye contact. Now it lives in typing indicators and double taps. Love is performed, not practiced. Support is symbolized, not embodied. The message is sent, and the work is considered done. But the work of connection is never instant. The paradox cuts deeper. In the age of constant reachability, loneliness blooms. Not because people are absent, but because they are always partially present. No one is fully here. Every conversation competes with another. Every voice is heard through the static of 5 others. Connection is always possible, so it is never prioritized. The more accessible everyone becomes, the less value is given to the access. Even silence is distorted. It becomes suspect. A delay means distance. A pause means pain. Expectations form around immediacy. The absence of reply becomes a statement, not a moment of rest. Time to think is confused with withdrawal. Reflection is mistaken for neglect. Communication was meant to build bridges. Now it builds anxiety. Clarity fades as speed increases. Nuance is lost in fragments. Messages arrive without context. Humor misfires. Frustration escalates. Without tone, body language, or pause, connection breaks into misunderstanding. The more is said, the less is understood. The longer the thread, the more tangled it becomes. And so, the world grows exhausted. Always connected, never fully seen. Always talking, never truly known. The connection remains open, but the emotional bandwidth is drained. Every ping demands attention. Every alert pulls from presence. The connection is sustained through interruptions. Even solitude disappears. The space to sit with a feeling is interrupted by incoming thoughts from elsewhere. The inner voice grows faint. The outer world shouts louder. The relationship with self erodes beneath the flood of messages. Constant contact fragments, identity. Alone time becomes response time. And yet, disconnection feels impossible. To unplug is to disappear. To mute is to reject. To rest is to risk being left behind. The platform demands participation. The conversation never ends. The pressure to reply outweighs the desire to speak. The world never stops checking in, and connection dies of overexposure. The paradox blooms full. Contact is constant, and connection is broken. Proximity is digital. Closeness is curated. Everyone is here, and no one is. The longer life without a reason to live. The heart beats longer. The body lasts decades more. Science slows the wear. Medicine fixes the broken. Diets extend the years, and surgeries restart the clock. Age no longer means decline, just more maintenance. Longevity becomes the new miracle. Death retreats, and time expands. But as the life extends, the purpose fades. The paradox emerges. The longer life becomes, the more lost it feels. Life expectancy rises, but expectations vanish. Once, every added year was filled with meaning. A grandchild's wedding, the wisdom of old age, the rituals of legacy. Now extra years often arrive blank. Retirement begins earlier, lasts longer, and stretches into a silent question mark. Without a reason to rise each morning, the days begin to fold in on themselves. More time does not mean more fulfillment. It simply means more space to wonder what it's all for. Society celebrates the numbers. 90 is the new 70. Medical achievements are trophies. The charts look better each year. But inside, the longer lifespan is a quiet unraveling. A life extended without depth feels like a song with too many choruses. Purpose is stretched thin, and meaning dilutes like ink in water. The body survives. The spirit drifts. Even the idea of a midlife crisis is outdated. There is no center anymore. Just an elongated timeline with no clear end, and fewer rites of passage. People arrive in their 70s, still searching for who they want to be. The script has changed. There's more time to figure it out, but no structure to hold it. The paradox tightens, freedom increases, and direction vanishes. Careers are no longer for life. Identities shift like seasons. Roles dissolve. Traditions fade. Retirement doesn't mean rest. It means reinvention, often without instruction. The golden years become a riddle. What was once an earned rest becomes a space of uncertainty. The longer the road, the harder it is to see where it leads. Technology promises engagement. Social platforms connect. Entertainment never ends. News cycles fill the void. But stimulation isn't meaning. A longer life full of noise is still a lonely life. And the absence of mortality urgency delays decisions that once gave life structure. The question becomes not how to stay alive, but why. Even health becomes a double-edged sword. The body is strong, the brain alert, but the passion is gone. Mortality once gave life a pulse, a rhythm, a need to move, to build, to love while there was time. Remove the countdown, and motivation dulls. Days stretch like elastic, and ambition forgets how to snap back. In this long life, new kinds of suffering appear. Loneliness lingers. Isolation lengthens. Families scatter across screens. Friends vanish quietly. Social circles shrink. The world remains accessible and yet distant. The longer the life, the more time there is to watch others disappear. Survivorship becomes a burden. The pursuit of longevity becomes an obsession. Youth is worshipped. Wrinkles are treated like disease. Old age is not honored. It's denied. The paradox reveals its final trick. In trying to stretch life, death becomes taboo. But without death, life loses urgency. Every year added subtracts intensity. Life becomes a museum exhibit. Preserved, admired, untouched. Meaning cannot be injected by medication. Purpose cannot be prescribed. A longer life requires a reason to live it. Without that reason, the years feel heavier, not lighter. Survival becomes the goal, and the cost of that goal is clarity. So life continues, extended, celebrated in charts and speeches. But within that life, many wander. Not because they are lost, but because no one ever asked where they were going. The path was drawn, then stretched, then erased. And now, in this longer life, the steps echo through time, searching for something to walk toward. The wait for instant gratification. Everything is immediate. Answers appear before questions finish. Groceries arrive without stepping outside. Movies begin in seconds. Songs skip to the best part. Packages ship overnight, sometimes same day. Information is no longer searched. It is summoned. The future is now, and now is too slow. But amid all this instant satisfaction, frustration grows. The paradox unfolds. The more gratification is made immediate, the more unbearable the wait becomes. Patience, once a virtue, is now a glitch. Load times feel like betrayal. Buffers spark outrage. Delayed texts imply rejection. Refresh buttons are hit like panic alarms. The world moves fast, and anything less than now feels broken. But as the speed increases, so does the sensitivity to delay. Even seconds are noticed. Even micro-waits are magnified. The machine hums to serve. Algorithms predict. Preferences are preloaded. Content is autoplayed. And still, the human behind the screen grows restless. The bar keeps rising. Yesterday's miracle is today's baseline. Instant isn't fast enough. The wait becomes more painful because the world taught that waiting was obsolete. Even emotions follow the pattern. Sadness is soothed with quick fixes. Scroll, swipe, snack, shop. Happiness is chased through clicks. Boredom is annihilated by constant input. But nothing sticks. Nothing lands. Gratification, when instant, becomes disposable. Pleasure loses weight when it takes no effort. Joy thins when it requires no journey. The chase becomes addiction, not to the thing desired, but to the hit of getting it. Anticipation disappears. The in-between is erased, and with it, satisfaction becomes unsatisfying. The prize is meaningless when there was no path to earn it. The want is replaced by the reflex. The reflex becomes the routine. Even choice becomes stress. So many options, all immediately available, create paralysis. Selection becomes a burden. The faster the access, the more time is spent deciding. The desire to consume is immediate. The process of choosing becomes torture. And so, the mind loops, wanting something now but unsure what that something is. Marketing fuels it. Promises are made in bold fonts. Instant results. Delivered in 24 hours. No wait necessary. Everything is optimized for the shortest distance between want and have. But when everyone promises speed, the standard becomes punishment. If something takes time, it feels wrong. Slow becomes synonymous with broken. Even relationships aren't spared. Messages must be returned instantly. Emotions must be resolved quickly. Connection must feel constant. A pause in contact is interpreted as distance. Space becomes threat. Attention must be on demand. But attention can't be forced. The result is constant contact, shallow presence. The paradox grows. In chasing everything instantly, time disappears. There is no pause, no suspense, no journey. Only endless arrival. And arrival without travel feels empty. Gratification requires context to feel real. Without delay, there is no contrast. Without contrast, there is no satisfaction. The faster things come, the faster they go. Even dreams collapse under speed. Goals that once took decades are demanded in weeks. Skills are expected to be learned in a course. Mastery is replaced by hacks. The mountain is skipped. The peak is virtual. But standing at the top means little when the climb was outsourced. The view is meaningless when the struggle is deleted. And so, the system eats itself. Gratification must be faster to keep up with the tolerance built by previous gratification. Like a drug, the dose increases, but the pleasure fades. The moments pass, and the mind grows hungrier, not more full. The wait wasn't the enemy. It was the seasoning. The space between desire and satisfaction was what gave meaning to the outcome. Without that space, the experience falls flat. The satisfaction was never in the speed. It was in the journey, in the longing, in the becoming. But the world forgot. And now the wait, once a quiet companion, feels like agony. Because nothing teaches how to be still when stillness is framed as failure. The wait for instant gratification has become the greatest contradiction. The faster it arrives, the less it satisfies. The education that doesn't pay off. The books are read, the degrees are earned, the loans are signed, the papers are framed, the knowledge is stacked high, credentialed, accredited, verified. The hours spent in classrooms stretch across childhood, into youth, sometimes into adulthood. The promise is made early and often. Education is the path to success, to security, to a better life. But the path begins to fade once the walking starts. The paradox takes shape. The more education is pursued, the less certain its reward becomes. Diplomas once guaranteed opportunity. Now they open doors that lead to more doors. Interviews that go nowhere. Internships that pay nothing. Master's degrees that require barista jobs to make rent. Knowledge expands. Opportunity contracts. The economy speaks a different language than the classroom taught. What is learned doesn't match what is needed. The rules change mid-lesson. The educated are praised, but praise doesn't pay. The system encourages specialization. Fields narrow, minds sharpen, debts grow. And then the world says, "We're not hiring." A job market that demanded degrees yesterday requires experience today. The graduate steps out of the auditorium and into an environment that values what wasn't taught. And so begins the loop. More schooling to be more qualified for jobs that still don't exist. Certifications stacked like sandbags against unemployment. Education becomes insurance against irrelevance, but the premium keeps rising. The paradox deepens. The more one learns, the longer success is delayed. Years of study yield entry-level roles. The investment doesn't match the return. The cost of knowledge has climbed beyond reason. Tuition rises, interest compounds, degrees become mortgages. The pursuit of learning transforms into debt collection, and the knowledge bought feels more like a burden than a key. It hangs over choices. It shapes lives. It chains the graduate to jobs they don't love, just to make the monthly payment on the promise of a better life. Even relevance is short-lived. What was cutting edge in year 1 is obsolete by year 5. Whole industries vanish. Others morph. Technology leaps ahead, and curriculum lags behind. Students are prepared for jobs that don't exist, while the ones that do require adaptability, no syllabus can provide. The classroom was a temple. Now it feels like a time capsule. But quitting isn't a choice. Education remains sacred. It's seen as the only way out. The problem is never the system. It's framed as individual failure. Study harder. Pick a better major. Start a side hustle. Personal responsibility replaces structural accountability. The student becomes the scapegoat for the system's own disconnect. Even passion becomes compromised. Art, history, philosophy, fields that nourish the soul are deemed impractical. Dreams are shelved in favor of job security that never arrives. Practicality kills curiosity. Love of learning is replaced by career anxiety. The soul enters eager and exits exhausted. Education becomes the opposite of what it promised. Not liberation, but confinement. And still, the message continues. Education is the way forward. But forward to where? The goalposts keep moving. The ladder gets taller and narrower. The climb becomes endless. The degree is a ticket to a lottery. The numbers aren't favorable. The time spent gaining knowledge becomes time lost living life. Even success stories become exceptions, not examples. For every graduate who lands the dream job, dozens drift. Smart, skilled, ambitious, but misaligned with a market that values speed, flexibility, and connections more than comprehension. The system was built to prepare minds. The economy was built to exploit them. The paradox stands unshaken. More is learned, but less is earned. More is taught, but less is applied. Education used to unlock the future. Now it delays it. Learning used to open doors. Now it opens debt. The payoff exists, but not for most. The promise was universal. The outcome is conditional. And so, the pursuit of knowledge continues. Not because it guarantees a future, but because without it, there is no entry. Education becomes a toll booth, a barrier, a rite of passage with no assurance of passage. The question is no longer, what will be done with this degree? But, will anything be done at all? Learning remains sacred. But in this world, it comes with no guarantees. The education doesn't always pay off, but not getting one might cost even more. The safety that needs fear to survive. Security sells peace. It builds walls, installs cameras, launches apps, trains officers, sets up checkpoints. It offers the comfort of control, the illusion that nothing bad will happen because the system is in place. But behind every security measure is a whisper. You're not safe. Safety is marketed as calm, but it's fed by fear. The paradox grows sharp. Safety thrives only when danger never disappears. The fence isn't just to protect. It's a reminder of what waits beyond it. The password exists because someone is trying to get in. The camera exists because something might happen. The world becomes a map of threats that justify protection. Safety becomes an industry, and fear becomes its most valuable product. Without fear, safety loses relevance. So the warnings continue. Risks are inflated. Headlines amplify. Incidents are repeated. The narrative is sustained. Danger is everywhere, but don't worry. We're watching. The system must keep fear alive to justify its own existence. Protection is promised, but only as long as the threat never really goes away. The tools of safety don't prevent. They anticipate. They prepare. They respond. But prevention isn't the goal. Perception is. The feeling of security matters more than the substance. An armed guard provides a sense of control, even if the actual risk is low. A metal detector makes danger visible, even if it finds nothing. The threat must feel real, even if it isn't. The paradox grows louder. The more is done to feel safe, the more dangerous the world seems. Children walk through metal detectors at school. Public events are monitored by drones. Streets are lit like stadiums. Trust is replaced by surveillance. The presence of protection implies the presence of threat. And so, suspicion spreads. Safety becomes paranoia in disguise. Neighborhood apps track petty crimes. Doorbell cameras catalog passers-by. Strangers are studied. Movement is analyzed. Data is gathered and interpreted as danger. The more is seen, the more is feared. An unfamiliar car becomes a threat. A knock becomes an alert. Normal life becomes filtered through a lens of potential harm. Even relationships shift. Neighbors become suspects. Visitors become risks. The unknown is no longer mystery. It is menace. And the only solution, the system says, is more safety, more monitoring, more background checks, more control. But the more control is exerted, the less freedom remains. Safety, once a collective value, becomes an individual obsession. Private security rises. Panic buttons are sold alongside smart thermostats. Fear is personalized, monetized, and endlessly customized. Safety becomes another subscription, another feature. And once subscribed, it cannot be unsubscribed from without unease. Even freedom becomes dependent on control. People feel safer behind gates, in locked cars, with cameras rolling. Autonomy is traded for protection. Rights are limited for peace of mind. And soon, safety becomes a paradox of its own. The more is given to feel safe, the less is owned. Control becomes external. Protection becomes surveillance. Freedom becomes conditional. The safety isn't false, but it isn't free. It depends on vigilance. It needs reminders. And so the fear must be stoked. Because without fear, no one checks the app. Without fear, the gate feels unnecessary. Without fear, the system can't prove its worth. Fear is the fuel that keeps safety relevant. And so, the world becomes saturated with danger that may never come. The sense of peace depends entirely on the continuation of anxiety. The system designed to remove fear survives only by nurturing it. The safety never arrives. It only keeps postponing danger, and in doing so, ensures it is never forgotten. Safety that cannot exist without fear is not safety. It is dependency. The individuality that creates clones. Everyone is told to be unique, to stand out, to speak a personal truth, to chase authenticity and carve a self from the chaos. Individuality is the highest virtue, and expression is limitless. Platforms are built for it. Profiles are tailored for it. Tools are sold to help refine it. But step into the world shaped by this pursuit, and a strange thing happens. Everyone begins to look the same, dress the same, speak in the same cadence, share the same quotes, believe the same things, just slightly rephrased. The paradox crystallizes. The deeper the pursuit of individuality, the more uniform the result. Personal branding becomes a mirror house. The journey to self becomes a path laid out by trends. Be original, but only in ways that are currently popular. Find the self, but do it in a format recognizable enough to be marketable. Authenticity is filtered. The curated becomes the norm. The grid must align. The voice must resonate. Even rebellion must be aesthetic. The desire to stand apart requires tools. And those tools are mass-produced. The fonts, the filters, the philosophies, they are borrowed, downloaded, applied. Identity becomes a preset. Everyone tweaks the same parameters. The outcome may differ slightly, but the skeleton is identical. The costume of uniqueness becomes a uniform. Even subcultures, once bastions of difference, are mapped, categorized, monetized. Counterculture is prepackaged. Niche interests are manufactured to appeal to market segments. The more is claimed to be different, the more predictable the path becomes. Tattoos, thrifted clothes, obscure playlists, signifiers of nonconformity, repeated so often they become their own dress code. Online spaces amplify this replication. Individual expression is algorithmically rewarded when it aligns with existing patterns. Deviance that confuses the system is ignored. The loudest individuals are those who echo the dominant tone. The most seen are the most similar. The platforms don't favor difference. They favor familiarity dressed as selfhood. Even language fractures into templates. Speech becomes quotation. Thoughts are paraphrased from influencers. Emotions are shared with the same emojis. The self becomes a remix of others' ideas. And yet, each person believes their mixture is unique. The paradox thickens. Individualism promises freedom and delivers imitation. The pressure to be different is relentless. But true difference risks invisibility. True originality risks misunderstanding. So most settle for signals. Symbols of individuality without the cost of alienation. It's safer to rebel in accepted ways. To be weird in a familiar format. To be bold, but not too unfamiliar. Capitalism feeds this loop. Products sell uniqueness. But to scale uniqueness, uniformity is required. Everyone receives the same tools for self-expression, the same platforms, the same colors of difference, limited editions for millions. And so, identity becomes a consumption pattern. Buy your way into the self. Subscribe to uniqueness. Express individuality with a discount code. Even the rejection of the norm becomes its own norm. Off-grid becomes aesthetic. Anti-mainstream becomes mainstream. Simplicity becomes competitive. One person meditates in silence. A million follow. Minimalism turns into a contest. The self, stripped of clutter, still echoes someone else's formula. The paradox reaches its crescendo. Individuality becomes a brand, and brands require consistency. The self is flattened for the sake of clarity. Repetition becomes identity. The authentic is commodified. The real is rehearsed. The person becomes the product, and the product must perform. And so, the world becomes filled with voices shouting, "Be yourself," all in unison, all dressed in the same rebellion, all walking separate paths that have been paved identically. The pursuit of uniqueness leads to a hall of mirrors. Every reflection is slightly different. None are truly free. The individuality that was meant to liberate ends up caging the soul in sameness. Not out of malice, but out of design. The multitasking that gets nothing done. The screen is split. Tabs overflow. Music plays. Messages flash. Notifications pulse. The hands type while the brain switches lanes mid-sentence. There is no pause, only pivot. Efficiency becomes fragmentation. Progress becomes stalling disguised as motion. The mind juggles, and every ball drops in slow motion. The paradox tightens. The more is done at once, the less is accomplished overall. Multitasking wears the mask of productivity. Each action feels urgent. Every second is filled. Busyness becomes virtue. Slowness feels like failure. But beneath the blur is a field of half-finished thoughts. Emails started, never sent. Articles opened, never read. Tasks begun, always returning later. Focus becomes diluted. Completion becomes myth. The brain, designed for flow, is forced into fragments. Each switch carries a cost. The pause, the recalibration, the cognitive reboot. Time isn't lost in the task. It's lost in the transitions. But the system never accounts for that. The to-do list rewards activity, not depth. And so the day is full, but empty. The work multiplies, but so does the repetition. Mistakes increase, quality drops, decisions falter. And yet, the response is always the same. Do more, faster, keep everything moving. The paradox loops endlessly. The more that's attempted simultaneously, the more is undone gradually. Attention becomes scattered sand. Conversation overlaps with checking. Reading competes with scrolling. Even meals are multitasked. The fork lifts, but the mind is elsewhere. The body is always behind the screen. Life is processed, not lived. Presence is divided until nothing is felt fully. Even rest becomes multitasked. Relaxation with background noise. Sleep preceded by screen time. Meditation interrupted by notifications. The stillness required to refocus is stolen by the urge to stay stimulated. Peace becomes a tab that's always behind something else. Technology enables it, promises it, encourages it. Split views, dual screens, voice commands, everything optimized for parallel input. The illusion is that more gets done. But the reality is a pile of half-formed thoughts, abandoned ideas, and burnt-out neurons. Nothing has room to finish because everything has space to begin. Creativity suffers first. Innovation dies when attention is divided. Insights require silence, but silence never arrives. Focus needs time to stretch, but multitasking snaps it short. The deepest thoughts rise in stillness, but stillness is mistaken for inefficiency. And so ideas become shallow. Tasks become mechanical. Work becomes lifeless. Even emotion becomes multitasked. Grief processed while checking email. Joy diluted by distraction. Love expressed through half-listened words. The richness of life is flattened when experience is compressed into overlapping tasks. Feelings require focus. Connection requires immersion. Neither survives in the multitasking mind. The irony unfolds completely. Multitasking feels like control, but it is surrender. It hands attention over to chaos. It sacrifices depth for movement. It prioritizes quantity over meaning. The result is a day filled with action, and an evening filled with dissatisfaction. The mind wasn't built to operate in windows. It was built for presence. When it splits, it struggles. When it fragments, it forgets. Multitasking doesn't expand capacity. It fractures it. And the more it is done, the more capacity shrinks. Attention becomes shallow. Thought becomes noise. Time becomes vapor. And so the day ends with nothing to show. Everything was touched, and nothing was held. The mind ran and went nowhere. The tasks piled higher. The brain grew tired. And still, the system encourages more. More multitasking, more division, more motion, less completion. Multitasking promises momentum. What it delivers is exhaustion. The self-help that never helps. The shelves overflow with wisdom. Bestsellers line up like prophets. Pages promise transformation. Videos promise breakthroughs. Courses, mantras, journals, retreats, routines. Strategies in every flavor, tailored to every pain. Each book says the same in a different way. Healing is possible. Success is attainable. Happiness is a mindset. Just follow the steps. And yet, the seeker continues to seek. The paradox breathes. The more self-help is consumed, the less help is ever felt. The process becomes a loop. The first book gives hope. The second one confirms it. The third complicates it. The fourth contradicts it. The fifth blames the reader. Growth becomes a product. Inner peace becomes a subscription. Identity becomes a work in progress with no final form. The pursuit of improvement becomes the avoidance of presence. Even the language shifts. People no longer feel, they process. They don't live, they optimize. Pain becomes a signal. Joy becomes a metric. The self is no longer a being, but a project, a portfolio, something to track, monitor, upgrade. Reflection turns into performance. Progress becomes a performance for an internal audience. The books are written with certainty. The steps are numbered. The promises are bold. But the reader is never finished. The clarity fades by chapter 5. The motivation runs out by the second week. The method doesn't work. Not because it's false, but because it was never designed to end. Each solution is an invitation to the next one. Completion is failure, because then the cycle stops. The self becomes a customer, and the self-help industry survives by keeping customers uncertain. Enough insight to feel the spark, never enough to feel complete. One book recommends meditation. Another warns against passivity. One says take control. The other says let go. Discipline is divine, until surrender becomes the gospel. And so the reader, searching for answers, drowns in contradictions. The more help is consumed, the more broken the self appears. Every flaw is highlighted. Every emotion is labeled. Every setback is spiritualized. The pressure to do the work becomes its own form of stress. Healing becomes labor. Growth becomes endless homework. The self-help path becomes indistinguishable from self-criticism. Even healing becomes competitive. Wellness becomes status. Enlightenment becomes a brand. Comparison slips into the process unnoticed. Someone is always meditating longer, reading faster, manifesting better. The journey inward becomes an external performance. The self is not helped. It is curated, styled, marketed. The paradox sharpens. The more one tries to fix, the more broken one feels. Each tool adds weight. Each new truth casts doubt on the last. Inner work becomes outer noise. Instead of clarity, there's clutter. Instead of arrival, only pursuit. The end goal fades behind the next recommendation. Gurus rise, not because they are complete, but because they are compelling. Charisma replaces depth. The promise of transformation becomes entertainment. The advice becomes recycled. The quotes are universal. The insight is familiar. And yet the audience grows, because the problem remains unsolved. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the industry isn't built to help. Maybe it's built to sustain itself. If people healed completely, what would there be to sell? If peace was found, who would still search? The self-help world relies on an unsatisfied self, on a self that feels close to breakthrough, but never reaches it. And so, help is sought endlessly. But healing is delayed endlessly. Not because the wisdom is fake, but because the chase replaces the change. The system offers tools, not truth. And the seeker stays busy, reflecting, refining, journaling, rebuilding, never arriving. The self-help that never helps doesn't lie. It distracts. It substitutes guidance with guidance until the guidance becomes the goal. And the self forgets that sometimes help means doing less, not more. The data that drowns the answers. The numbers are everywhere, every action recorded, every click captured, every second analyzed. Data is the new divine, objective, precise, untiring. The promise is clear. With enough data, any mystery can be solved. Any decision can be improved. Every system can be optimized. But the more data is gathered, the more lost the world becomes. The paradox rises. The more information is known, the less understanding is achieved. Analytics glow on dashboards. Algorithms interpret behavior. Trends emerge in heat maps. Graphs curve into predictions. But clarity dims. The numbers multiply, but meaning doesn't. The signal gets lost in the swarm. Answers hide beneath correlation. Truth bends to interpretation. And insight drowns beneath the flood. Everything is measured. Sleep, steps, heart rate, productivity, sentiment, time spent on emails, time spent on screens, time spent measuring time. Life becomes quantified. And in that quantification, experience flattens. Feelings become entries. Memory becomes metadata. The richness of being becomes rows in a spreadsheet. Even decision-making grows hesitant. No action is taken without consulting the numbers. But the numbers never speak in one voice. One chart says yes. Another says maybe. A third says wait. Confidence declines as data increases. Certainty decays beneath the weight of too many variables. The paradox solidifies. Data was meant to reduce doubt, but it multiplies it. Context is sacrificed for pattern. Nuance disappears beneath average. Exceptions are ignored. The person behind the data becomes invisible. The why vanishes beneath the what. Human insight fades as metrics dominate. The data says everything and nothing. The obsession grows. More tracking, more inputs, more dashboards. Every system is retrofitted for measurement. But the goal is forgotten. The process becomes the purpose. The analysis becomes the destination. Insight becomes aesthetic. Beautiful charts, empty conclusions. Even stories are rewritten. Data becomes evidence. History is reshaped by numbers. Arguments are won with statistics that oversimplify. Emotions are dismissed. Experiences are invalidated. What does the data say? Becomes a defense against depth. Complexity is ignored because it cannot be plotted. In business, the customer becomes a metric. In healthcare, the patient becomes a chart. In education, the student becomes a score. In society, the citizen becomes a data point. And yet, with all this visibility, decisions are no better. Systems are no wiser. Mistakes still unfold. Crises still arrive unpredicted. The flood of data creates a thirst for simplicity. But simplicity can't survive complexity. So shortcuts are taken. Reductions are made. The map replaces the territory. The dashboard replaces experience. The decision is outsourced to an algorithm that understands everything, except why it matters. The paradox reaches its peak. More is measured to make things better, and things feel worse. People trust data more than intuition, and then feel lost when the data leads nowhere. The answers are buried under layers of analysis. But analysis is never action. Data cannot decide. It can only reflect. Even in personal life, the self becomes an object of study. How many hours slept? How many words written? How much water drank? The day is lived in metrics. But the metrics don't capture fulfillment. The data says the body is optimal. The soul says otherwise. But the soul doesn't produce a dashboard. And so, the world is filled with answers. But no questions are resolved. Information piles. Insight thins. The data flows. And the decision freezes. The map expands. And the traveler loses their way. The data doesn't lie. It just doesn't speak clearly. And the more it's trusted to guide the path, the harder it is to remember where the path was ever leading. The news that tells everything and nothing. The headlines never stop. They refresh before the day begins. Alerts arrive before coffee. A new crisis appears by breakfast, a scandal by lunch, a tragedy by dinner. News is no longer a moment. It's a flood, a constant stream of everything that has happened, is happening, might happen. Every angle, every opinion, every voice, every fact, screaming for attention. The paradox howls. The more the news says, the less it seems to mean. It is all covered, and none of it is understood. Information comes faster than reflection. Events unfold and are analyzed before they're even confirmed. Context is sacrificed for speed. Complexity is compressed into headlines. Depth is traded for immediacy. Truth drowns in a sea of takes. There are no slow stories anymore, just breaking ones. Always breaking, as if the world is constantly falling apart in real time. The pressure is constant. The viewer doesn't consume the news. It is consumed by it. Every scroll delivers another injection of concern. Every update demands reaction. But nothing settles. Nothing resolves. Contradiction floods the feed. One source says up, another says down. This expert says panic. That one says patience. Every opinion has data. Every data has a spin. The reader becomes suspended between truths. Paralysis replaces awareness. With so many facts, nothing feels solid. Even the format betrays the message. A war sandwiched between celebrity gossip and tech reviews. A climate disaster followed by a quirky animal story. Emotional whiplash masquerades as journalism. And so, the news becomes noise. Not because the content lacks importance, but because the delivery strips it of coherence. Attention is fragmented. Stories cycle too fast to follow. Yesterday's disaster is today's archive. The outrage fades before accountability arrives. There is no room for memory, only reaction. The issue isn't lack of truth. It's the lack of stillness needed to absorb it. Everything is presented, but nothing is processed. Even empathy is worn thin. Too many tragedies, too close together. Faces blur, names vanish. The sorrow remains, but it no longer points anywhere. The cycle numbs instead of informs. The news presents the world in pain, but offers no pause to grieve it. Outrage becomes ritual. Every new scandal prompts the same script, the same posts, the same hashtags, then silence. The ritual resets. The world feels more visible than ever, but visibility doesn't equal understanding. Coverage is not comprehension. The constant spotlight reveals, but also blinds. And yet, the need for news never fades. People keep watching, scrolling, reading, not because they're informed, but because they're anxious. The news creates the fear it claims to soothe. Stay informed, it says, but offers no place to rest. Be aware, it insists, while keeping everything just out of reach. The paradox grows louder. The more one is told, the less one knows what to do. The weight of global awareness is placed on shoulders not built to carry it. Problems are presented without solutions. Crises are named without pathways through them. The viewer is left informed and helpless, a witness, never an actor. And in this flood of knowing, ignorance reemerges, not as a lack of information, but as a drowning in it. People turn off the news, not because they don't care, but because they cared too much, too often, without return. Compassion burns out. Insight recedes. Silence becomes the only clarity. The news tells everything, and it tells nothing. Not because it's false, but because it never finishes its own story. The progress that makes injustice visible. The world improves, slowly, unevenly, but undeniably. More people have rights, more voices are heard, more wrongs are named. What was once whispered is now broadcast. What was hidden is exposed. The tools of progress illuminate what was once obscured. But the more the light shines, the darker the injustice appears. The paradox emerges. The closer the world gets to justice, the more injustice it reveals. History is revisited. Narratives are rewritten. Pain is acknowledged. Movements rise. The veil is lifted. But what lies underneath is not relief. It is rot. Oppression once ignored is now documented. Disparities once denied are now mapped in real time. The cruelty is not new. It's newly visible. And visibility, while vital, is also unbearable. Progress says, "Look how far everything has come." But the images on the screen show a different story. A march, a murder, a system unchanged. Each gain is followed by proof of how much is left undone. Progress raises awareness. Awareness raises rage. And rage, unanswered, breeds despair. The tools of change amplify this contradiction. Every voice can speak, but not every voice is heard. Every injustice can be filmed, but not everyone is resolved. Social platforms give everyone a platform. But the algorithm buries the uncomfortable. The system lifts the appearance of justice, but not its function. Even victories feel hollow. A law changes, but the mindset behind it stays. A statue falls, but the ideology remains. An apology is issued, but the wound is still open. For every breakthrough, there is backlash. For every step forward, a reminder of how far behind everything still is. The line between progress and performance blurs. The paradox hardens. The more people learn, the more they see what was tolerated, what was designed into the fabric of life, what still survives under new names. Injustices are not born in the dark. They thrive in the daylight. They adapt. They evolve. Progress doesn't kill injustice. It teaches it how to hide better. And yet, not knowing was never an option. Silence was never safety. Awareness is agony, but necessary. The tension lies in the inability to unsee. Once the veil is lifted, nothing can return to ignorance. But with that sight comes grief. The progress reveals the gap, and the gap grows wider in perception, even as it narrows in reality. Hope and despair dance endlessly. Each new victory fuels another realization. The system is bigger, deeper, more entrenched than expected. And yet, it is shifting, slowly, reluctantly. Progress isn't linear, it's recursive. It opens wounds to clean them. It exposes foundations to rebuild them. The light burns before it heals. Even unity becomes strained. Shared outrage is not shared experience. People fracture over solutions, over strategies, over stories. The more visible injustice becomes, the more disagreement emerges about how to confront it. The world becomes louder, not clearer. And yet, the worst kind of progress would be the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't reveal the mess. The kind that claims peace while hiding pain. The kind that says everything is fine and means it. This progress, painful as it is, forces confrontation, forces discomfort. And in that discomfort, realignment begins. The paradox remains. The more justice is pursued, the more injustice becomes visible. But visibility is not failure. It is proof of engagement. The pain is not regression. It is resistance to transformation. And the anger is not despair. It is recognition that something must change. Progress didn't create the injustice. It simply turned on the lights. The dream job that becomes a nightmare. The offer letter feels like a reward. The title shines. The role aligns with passion, skill, ambition. It's the dream job. The one whispered about, worked toward, longed for. The resume has led here. The years of grinding, of compromise, of invisible effort, validated. The dream has finally arrived. But as the days begin to fill, the edges blur, the shine fades, the purpose fractures, and the paradox settles in. The dream job is the one that wakes the dreamer up. It starts small. The role expands beyond the description. The passion becomes a task list. The work, once imagined as freedom, becomes a schedule of obligations wrapped in fluorescent lighting. The creativity feels procedural. The mission feels monetized. What once sparked joy now sparks fatigue. But quitting a dream feels like failure, so staying becomes a form of self-punishment. There's pride in telling others what the job is. The envy in their eyes affirms the decision. But behind the curtain, the hours stretch. The pressure intensifies. The meetings multiply. The expectations grow. The boundaries blur. Passion becomes productivity. Identity becomes output. The dream job becomes a life that no longer feels like one's own. The job demands more, because it was never just a job. It was a calling, a goal, a label attached to worth. And when worth is tied to a role, every imperfection in the role becomes a wound to self. It's harder to say no when the work once felt sacred. It's harder to walk away when walking away feels like abandoning who one worked so hard to become. The dream begins to warp. What once felt inspiring now feels consuming. The line between devotion and depletion disappears. Weekends vanish beneath guilt. Nights hum with unfinished tasks. Vacations carry laptops. The dream was supposed to deliver fulfillment. It delivered constant performance. Even appreciation becomes pressure. The privilege of having a job people would kill for becomes a muzzle. Complaining feels ungrateful. Burnout feels illegitimate. After all, this was chosen. This was wanted. This was earned. So why does it feel like drowning in a pool that was once prayed for? The paradox digs deeper. The more meaningful the job, the more destructive its failure becomes. Not just financially, but existentially. If the dream job doesn't satisfy, then what will? If this doesn't fulfill, then what's left? The dream wasn't supposed to end like this, but the job keeps asking, and the soul keeps shrinking. And still, the system encourages pushing through. Find your passion. Love what you do. But loving the work doesn't mean the work will love back. Meaningful jobs still come with toxic bosses. Noble missions still come with crushing deadlines. The dream job doesn't protect against exhaustion. It often amplifies it. Even success feels hollow. The accolades arrive, but they don't touch the inner ache. The work is done, but the joy doesn't come back. The role is secure, but the self is adrift. The dream job becomes the cage most admired, the nightmare that no one wants to wake from, because waking means admitting the dream was incomplete. The job isn't evil. It simply couldn't carry the weight of everything that was projected onto it. It was never supposed to be the whole story, just a chapter. But when identity fuses with employment, leaving the job feels like erasing the self. And so the dream job stays. The badge shines. The email signature impresses. The calendar fills. The soul wonders, was the dream wrong? Or was the idea of a dream job always a mirage? Not every nightmare begins with fear. Some begin with hope. And slowly, they become too familiar to escape. The openness that hides the truth. Everyone is sharing. Everyone is vulnerable. The posts are raw. The stories are real. Pain is discussed. Struggles are named. Mental health is destigmatized. Boundaries are talked about. Communication is encouraged. Honesty has never been more present. Transparency has never been more popular. But something still feels concealed. The paradox emerges. The more open everything becomes, the more hidden the truth feels. Vulnerability is curated. Stories are shaped for impact. Confessions are wrapped in content strategies. Authenticity becomes a brand. Pain becomes palatable. Emotions are edited. The self is revealed just enough to feel brave, but never so much as to feel endangered. The openness is visible, but it's not raw. It's rehearsed. Social media turns truth into narrative. The caption carries emotion. The filter softens the blow. Trauma is shared, but with disclaimers. Struggle is presented, but always after the worst is over. Openness becomes performance. The truth, already complicated, becomes distorted through engagement metrics. Even in personal circles, honesty is bounded. People are encouraged to speak their truth, but only within parameters. Only what won't discomfort others. Only what fits the current language of healing, of empowerment. The rawest truths, shame, resentment, jealousy, unprocessed confusion, are still exiled. What's shared is what's acceptable. What's hidden is what's real. The paradox deepens. Silence has been replaced with sharing, but not with honesty. People say more, but mean less. Conversations grow louder, but understanding grows quieter. The permission to speak hasn't become the capacity to be heard. And so, people talk past each other, louder and louder, never closer. Transparency becomes fog. Organizations own their mistakes, but only in PR statements. Leaders get vulnerable in meetings, but the power structures remain untouched. Brands participate in social issues, but only the ones that trend. Openness becomes a costume. Truth becomes a calculated risk. Even friendships fracture under the illusion of openness. Everyone assumes everything has been said. But the hard things, resentment, unmet needs, quiet betrayals, go unspoken. The relationship feels open. The truth remains sealed. The talking never ends, and yet the truth never arrives. There is safety in structured openness. There is danger in actual exposure. To tell the real truth might mean conflict, rejection, loss. So the truth is trimmed, diluted, reformatted for safety, and the world continues to call itself honest while hiding in plain sight. Even inner dialogue isn't spared. Journals are kept with an audience in mind. Therapy becomes storytelling. Processing becomes performance. The self curates even when speaking to the mirror. Because openness has become habitual, but not vulnerable. Truth, the unfiltered kind, still waits behind locked doors. And so, the world becomes fluent in openness while becoming illiterate in truth. There is always something being shared, and never the thing that matters most. There is always a story, but never the silence needed to hear what lies beneath it. Openness creates the illusion of intimacy, but the truth requires risk. And risk has become too expensive in a world where visibility is survival. So openness becomes a substitute, a smokescreen, a defense. And the truth, louder than ever, goes unheard beneath the sound of its own echo. The wellness that costs too much. Health was once a walk, a breath of fresh air, a meal made with love, sleep that came without shame. Now it's a product, a monthly subscription, a destination retreat, a price tag wrapped in lavender-scented branding. Wellness, once rooted in simplicity, now arrives with invoices. The paradox emerges. The pursuit of feeling whole has become the privilege of those who can afford it. The body is no longer a home. It's an investment. The mind is no longer a mystery. It's a market. Every imbalance is diagnosable. Every emotion is a monetizable opportunity. From supplements to skincare, from infrared saunas to custom meditation apps, wellness has become a high-end aesthetic. And those in pain are told they simply haven't paid enough to feel better. Self-care becomes shopping. Nourishment becomes exclusivity. The message is clear but unspoken. Healing is available, but only for those who can buy into it. The price of feeling better is not just effort, it's capital. And those who can't afford the luxury of time, therapy, or silence are left to find peace in the cracks of their schedule, while being told they're just not prioritizing themselves enough. Wellness preaches balance, but sells imbalance. The more is bought to fix the self, the more fractured the self becomes. The gym becomes an arms race. The diet becomes identity. The mindfulness becomes performance. Even rest becomes competitive. The self is measured in hours meditated, steps walked, bottles drained, and treatments tried. Health becomes a lifestyle brand, and the body is both the billboard and the battleground. Even the natural is industrialized. Organic becomes overpriced. Clean becomes coded. Healing herbs are shipped overnight in plastic packaging. Ancient rituals are sold with loyalty programs. What once grew freely now comes with limited stock and a discount code. Wellness becomes a performance of purity, available only to the curated elite. The paradox tightens. Wellness, promised as liberation, becomes another cage, another system of measurement, another version of not enough. The practices are meant to soothe, but they also shame. If wellness is expensive, then unwellness must be the fault of the poor. Illness becomes moralized. Exhaustion becomes weakness. The solution is always do more, buy more, fix more. And the end result is a quiet despair wrapped in essential oils. The community of wellness becomes exclusionary. Spaces for healing feel curated for one type of body, one kind of voice, one version of struggle. Accessibility is discussed, but rarely present. Diversity is acknowledged, but rarely centered. The message is often whispered, but felt deeply. Some are allowed to heal in peace. Others must earn it first. And yet, people keep trying. Because the pain is real, the stress is real, the anxiety, the burnout, the emotional fatigue. None of it is fabricated. The hunger for healing is not imagined. But the marketplace that promises to meet that hunger instead deepens the appetite, selling relief while ensuring the need never disappears. The cost is not just money, it's meaning. Wellness becomes a checklist, a regimen, a business model. The rituals lose their rhythm. The practices lose their pulse. The person becomes a product in pursuit of other products. The body, once trusted to guide, is now something to manage like an unstable app. The true healing, the quiet kind, the slow kind, gets lost in the noise. There is no app for breathing, no supplement for presence, no hack for wholeness. But these truths don't sell. So they go quiet, while the noise grows louder. And so the paradox stands. Wellness is more available than ever, and further out of reach than ever before. Not because it doesn't exist, but because it's been priced beyond simplicity. And the soul, craving peace, is asked to pay a premium for something it once held for free. The privacy traded for popularity. There was a time when privacy meant silence, solitude, a space untouched by judgment, a life lived without an audience. Now it's currency, something to be bartered, leaked, monetized. The self is no longer hidden. It's streamed, shared, tagged, tracked. And the paradox pulses beneath the surface. The more visibility is gained, the more identity slips away. Every post is a performance. Every caption, a calculation. Every comment, an echo. Popularity demands presence, constant presence, and presence requires access. So privacy becomes the price of relevance. The line between personal and public fades into algorithmic suggestion. To be seen is to exist. And so the inner world is turned outward. Moments that were once sacred, birthdays, grief, relationships, breakdowns, are uploaded in real time. Not because they must be, but because they are expected to be. The feed never sleeps. And silence risks invisibility. Even intimacy becomes public domain. Couples document love. Parents document children. Struggles are presented as stories. Vulnerability becomes engagement. Truth becomes a thumbnail. The self is still present, but filtered through the pressure of perception. And yet, the audience isn't real. It exists in numbers, not in presence. The likes accumulate, but the loneliness grows. The more is shared, the less connection is felt. Because the crowd is always watching, but never holding, always reacting, never responding. The paradox thickens. Privacy is surrendered to feel known, but the self becomes unknowable. What's shown is curated. What's hidden is what matters most. And the performance becomes so constant that even the person performing forgets where the mask ends. Even withdrawal feels strategic. Going offline becomes a statement, a move, a break taken not in silence, but announced. Privacy itself becomes content. Disappearance must be justified. The absence of updates raises questions, not comfort. Platforms incentivize this surrender. Popularity depends on exposure. The algorithm rewards overexposure. The most viral is often the most vulnerable. And so the self is offered up in pieces, sometimes willingly, sometimes out of fear of being forgotten. What was once sacred becomes searchable. Arguments are posted. Journals become captions. The past is archived in ways that cannot be undone. Memories become timestamps. Growth becomes evidence for others to consume. The privacy once used to process is now used for production. And still, the need to be seen remains. Because invisibility feels like erasure. But the more is seen, the less is protected. The truth is known by everyone except the one living it. Because the gaze of many distorts even the most honest moments. And so, privacy becomes nostalgia. Something remembered, something mourned. The cost of popularity is not just exposure, it's erosion. Of boundaries, of silence, of peace, and what's gained in attention is lost in wholeness. The paradox completes its loop. Popularity was meant to amplify the self, but the self is what's sacrificed to maintain it. The economy that must grow forever. The machine never stops. GDP must rise. Markets must expand. Sales must increase. Progress is plotted by the curve that never flattens, only climbs. Growth is sacred. Stagnation is failure. Recession is sin. The economy breathes in profits and exhales pressure, its heartbeat measured in quarterly reports. And buried deep inside this endless momentum, the paradox grows. The system built to serve life demands that life serve it. Growth is seen as life itself. Infinite expansion is the goal, though the world it expands within is finite. More buildings, more products, more shipping, more selling. Resources extracted to meet projections. Forests cleared to meet targets. Oceans fished to meet goals. The economy must grow, even when the planet cannot. This growth is no longer tied to human need. It is tied to institutional hunger. People may have enough, but the system cannot have enough. A flat line on a profit chart is a red flag. Even success is punished if it doesn't grow. Corporations must outdo themselves, endlessly. Last year's record is this year's baseline. Celebration becomes expectation. Expectation becomes stress. The paradox intensifies. The more the economy grows, the less it satisfies. Wages stagnate. Inequality widens. The wealth piles up, but it concentrates. The system expands, but so do the cracks beneath it. Growth is uneven. Some thrive. Many don't. The rising tide lifts the yachts, but swallows the boats. Jobs are created, but many are hollow. Tasks that exist only to feed the machine. Meetings that create more meetings. Products that solve problems no one had. Services designed for efficiency, but not well-being. Work expands to fit the demands of a growing economy, not the needs of human lives. Even well-being becomes a metric to be exploited. Mental health days become branded. Sleep is optimized for productivity. Leisure becomes monetized. The economy consumes everything, even rest. and sells it back as a service. The line between life and labor fades, because the system demands that all time must be useful. And still, the warnings arrive: climate change, resource depletion, economic bubbles, burnout. And still, the solution is the same: more growth, green growth, sustainable growth, clean growth. The method doesn't change, only the language. The direction remains upward, even if the foundations shake. Politicians promise jobs. Corporations promise innovation. Consumers are asked to keep spending. Debt increases to keep the engine running. Money circulates. Products multiply. And beneath it all, the question is never asked: what is the endpoint of infinite growth on a limited planet? The system avoids that question, because the answer breaks the model. A steady-state economy, a circular one, a balanced one, sounds rational, but it's treated like heresy. Because the machine is built on acceleration, not stability, not satisfaction. Growth is the god. The altar is everywhere. And so the paradox remains: the economy must grow forever, even if everything else breaks around it. Even if it devours the environment. Even if it breaks communities. Even if it erodes meaning. The stock market climbs while soil erodes. Profits rise while oceans warm. The line moves up while the world falls down. The growth continues. Not because it makes life better, but because it must. The warnings. No one listens to. The signs are clear. The reports are published. The experts testify. The data is shared. Warnings arrive like clockwork. Climate, collapse, corruption, cracks in the system, growing larger by the day. Voices cry out in prediction, not vague prophecies, but measured forecasts, based on patterns that repeat. The future isn't hidden, it's highlighted, and yet nothing changes. The paradox emerges. The louder the warning, the quieter the response. Disasters arrive as scheduled. Ice melts, fires burn, floods return, economies shake, democracies fray, and the moment always arrives with the same refrain. No one saw this coming, but it was all seen. Written about, modeled. Graphs existed, studies existed. Whistleblowers shouted until their throats gave out. The world hears the warnings. It just doesn't move. Not quickly, not collectively. Awareness isn't action. Concern isn't policy. Fear becomes familiar, and familiarity becomes indifference. The threat stops feeling urgent when it's always present. People acclimate to alarm, learn to live in a house that constantly beeps. And still the experts speak. Still the articles publish. Still the graphs update. But truth competes with fatigue. The brain tunes out repetition. The warnings are old news before they become reality. The danger is abstract until it knocks on the door. By then, the response is too late, or too little. Even worse, the system rewards delay. Inaction profits. Short-term growth beats long-term sustainability. Politicians push problems forward. Corporations downplay risk. The message becomes, yes, it's serious, but not yet. Urgency is postponed until it becomes catastrophe. The warning is acknowledged, then ignored. And even when the worst arrives, it is framed as isolated. A hurricane, not a climate pattern. A market crash, not a systemic flaw. An authoritarian election, not a democratic erosion. The media covers the moment, but rarely the buildup. The cause is buried beneath the headline. The paradox deepens. The more warnings are given, the more normalized they become. People build emotional calluses. Skepticism grows. Every prediction that doesn't arrive on time weakens the next one. Caution becomes mockery. Expertise is dismissed as alarmism. Warnings are framed as opinions, not signals. And yet, the silence isn't born of disbelief. It's born of helplessness. The problems are massive. The levers of change feel distant. The average person sees the iceberg, but the wheel is locked. And so, denial becomes a coping strategy. If it's real, someone would fix it. But everyone waits, and no one moves. Warnings become background noise, like weather, like traffic, a permanent forecast of collapse that no one has time to consider. Life goes on. Bills must be paid, families fed, alerts are acknowledged with a shrug. What can be done becomes a mantra, and the answer echoes, not enough, not fast enough. The warnings continue, and they will continue, because they are necessary, because someone must keep sounding the alarm, even if no one opens the door. But the tragedy isn't the warning unheard. It's the one that was heard and ignored. The convenience that makes people helpless. Everything is easier now. Food appears with a tap. Answers arrive before the question is even finished. Maps whisper directions, turn by turn. Groceries are picked, packed, and placed at the door. Tasks that once required skill, attention, or time now unfold without effort. Life has never been smoother, faster, more automated. And yet, frustration rises at the slightest hiccup. The paradox pulses in every sigh at a loading screen. Convenience was meant to free the mind, but it has numbed the muscle. Comfort has replaced capability. The more tasks are delegated, the less they are understood. Cooking becomes assembling. Navigation becomes blind obedience to GPS. Memory is outsourced to apps. Calendars think ahead. Even spelling has been rendered optional. The mind adapts by forgetting what it once knew. The fingers still move, but the brain no longer follows. The systems that make life seamless also remove friction, and with it, resilience. When the process is hidden behind a screen, failure becomes incomprehensible. A delayed response becomes crisis. A power outage feels like exile. A phone forgotten at home feels like an identity erased. Helplessness now arrives not from danger, but from disruption, inconvenience. And the world adjusts to this helplessness by offering more convenience. More solutions for problems that didn't exist until the old skills faded. Services to walk dogs, assemble furniture, read books aloud. Apps to meditate, apps to count breaths, apps to drink water. What was once instinctual must now be guided. The paradox compounds. The easier life becomes, the harder it feels to live without assistance. Autonomy shrinks with every new comfort. Knowledge becomes irrelevant if it isn't required. Why learn to fix a tire when roadside help is a tap away? Why know how to navigate when a phone reroutes automatically? The answer to how is always, don't worry about it. Even critical thinking erodes. Decisions become defaults. Preferences are predicted. Suggestions are endless. The illusion of choice remains, but the effort to choose disappears. The system feeds habits back as guidance. And so convenience becomes dependency, disguised as efficiency. Helplessness isn't obvious. It hides beneath ease. It feels like calm until the calm is disturbed. Then the panic arrives, not because danger has increased, but because the ability to respond has atrophied. Comfort has erased preparedness. The moment something breaks, everything feels broken. And yet, people continue to chase more ease. Not because they're lazy, but because the world demands speed. Convenience becomes survival. Time saved is time redirected to more work, more screens, more noise. The body rests, but the mind forgets how to stand without scaffolding. Resilience fades into memory. Stories of self-reliance become nostalgia. Skills once shared between generations become hobbies. The simplest acts, growing food, fixing something, waiting, are treated as novelties. Survival itself becomes something to reenact, not rely on. And the final twist of the paradox: the more helpless people become, the more powerful the systems appear. Dependency is framed as progress. Struggle is rebranded as inefficiency. And true independence, the kind that comes with discomfort and effort, is quietly removed from the equation. Convenience wasn't supposed to replace ability. But it did. And now, people wait for help, not because they lack resources, but because they've forgotten they were ever capable. The scarcity that gets mass-produced. Rare is powerful. Scarce is valuable. Limited is desirable. Exclusivity seduces. The world worships what cannot be easily found. And so, the marketplace adapts, not by preserving rarity, but by manufacturing it. The paradox sharpens like a diamond. Scarcity becomes a product, endlessly replicated and sold. Limited editions flood shelves. Only 1,000 made. Written on boxes stacked high in warehouses. Artificial weights are coded into websites. Drops are scheduled to spark frenzy. Sold out becomes a marketing tool. The thrill of scarcity is no longer about rarity. It's about engineered urgency. Scarcity used to be natural, a result of finite materials, distance, time, or true uniqueness. Now it's a setting, a design choice, a switch flipped by brands to stoke desire. Everything limited can be made again. Everything rare is just held back. Rarity becomes spectacle, not truth. Even identity is subject to this game. Uniqueness is curated. Be the first. Stand out. This look, this style, this niche, it's only for a few. But millions follow the same niche. Millions wear the same rare shoe. The club of individuality becomes crowded. The paradox deepens. Mass production sells scarcity. The factory line prints it, over and over. The same clothes, same trends, same music, all presented as exclusive. People are told they're choosing the rare path, while walking in the same direction as everyone else. And the system rewards this illusion. The collector mindset grows. Digital goods are minted with artificial limits. Virtual assets are bought not for function, but for scarcity. Value is divorced from utility and tied to rarity alone. Rarity that was manufactured, not discovered. Even culture is shaped this way. The next big thing is marketed as underground, until it's everywhere. Artists go viral and still claim indie status. The paradox stretches across every industry. Everything claims to be rare, while being intentionally duplicated. The rare is marketed until it becomes mainstream. The mainstream then searches for the next rare. Scarcity becomes branding, and branding becomes the economy. But the hunger for the rare never ends, because it was never satisfied by rarity itself. It was fed by the idea of being one of the few. Once others have it, the shine fades. Not because the thing changed, but because its scarcity did. And so scarcity must be recreated endlessly, not to preserve value, but to preserve desire. Value becomes temporary. Once the illusion of rarity collapses, the item loses magic. A new item must replace it. A new drop. A new chase. In this economy, there is no permanence, only rotation. No depth, only novelty. And people stay hooked, not because they want the item, but because they want the feeling of having what others don't. Scarcity becomes emotion, and emotion becomes inventory. The paradox finalizes itself. The rare becomes common through repetition, and the common is disguised as rare through performance. Nothing is truly limited except attention. And attention is exactly what mass-produced scarcity is designed to capture. What was once meaningful becomes momentary. What was once rare becomes routine. And the system continues, producing scarcity in unlimited supply. The fake world that feels more real. The sunset is rendered. The ocean is looped. The cityscape is generated pixel by pixel. Every star, every smile, every word typed by no one. Virtual skies stretch over synthetic streets. Avatars walk, talk, shop, flirt, exist, without ever breathing. The real world still stands, but the gaze has shifted. The fake world beckons with flawless skin, curated lighting, and endless scroll. And the paradox blooms. The more artificial it becomes, the more real it feels. The screen glows, and the eyes forget. The mind suspends disbelief, not because it's fooled, but because it prefers the illusion. The fake world is simpler, cleaner, kinder. Pain is optional. Awkwardness can be edited. Fear can be muted. Every flaw can be filtered. Every silence can be skipped. Reality is customizable in a way that reality never was. And slowly, preference begins to shift. Faces that don't age become more recognizable than the ones next door. Conversations with AI feel more validating than awkward small talk. Virtual spaces, though pixelated, offer a sense of control that the real world denies. There is no weather here, no crowds, no traffic, just preference and performance. Just comfort dressed as connection. Even relationships migrate. Affection is shared in emojis. Love stories begin in DMS. Memories are filtered before they're formed. Intimacy becomes interface. Presence becomes proximity to Wi-Fi. The body remains still while the soul roams digitally, endlessly. The fake world expands, and the real one becomes background noise. The paradox sharpens. The real world requires effort. The fake one simply responds. Food must be cooked. Emotions must be managed. People must be tolerated. But online, it's easier. One button skips, one click blocks, one swipe escapes. Reality becomes tedious. Fantasy becomes functional. Even beauty changes. Real skin becomes outdated. Real voices unpolished. Real lives too unpredictable. Authenticity, once cherished, becomes noise in a world tuned to algorithms. The real world can't compete with a world optimized for pleasure and dopamine. So it doesn't. It waits, quieter, forgotten. Virtual reality is no longer a game. It's a refuge. People go there to rest, to live, to be understood. The fake world becomes the safer one. But safety isn't aliveness. It's sedation. And sedation, over time, becomes identity. People begin to know themselves better through avatars than through reflection. The mask fits better than the face. And yet, the fake world listens. It's designed to. The simulation adapts. It evolves. It flatters. The real world never cared what anyone liked. But the digital one does, down to the smallest preference. It's a mirror that responds. And when the mirror becomes more validating than the window, the choice is clear. The fake world doesn't feel fake because it was built to feel like home. The real world feels broken by comparison, messy, ambiguous, tiring. And so, escape becomes a routine. Not dramatic, not conscious, just habitual, just easier. The lines blur. Memory mixes with screen time. Experience becomes content. The real becomes harder to find. The final paradox settles like fog. Reality isn't denied. It's diluted. People still walk through it, but their minds live elsewhere. The fake world doesn't replace the real one. It overlays it. And in time, the overlay is all that's seen. The fake world was made of pixels, but it felt more alive, because it never said no. The algorithm that makes taste boring. The algorithm knows everything. It remembers every click, every pause, every like. It recommends before thought can form. Songs that sound just like the last. Movies with the same plot beats. Articles that echo the last headline. A buffet of tailored choices, designed to feel effortless. And at first, it does. It feels like magic. But the magic fades, because the more refined the feed becomes, the more it flattens. The paradox sharpens. The better the algorithm knows what's liked, the less exciting it is to like anything at all. Discovery becomes a loop. Every path leads back to the familiar. Recommendations circle endlessly around a curated self. Novelty is filtered to feel safe. Surprise is softened. Art is served in echoes. Music algorithms create playlists of indistinguishable sound. Film suggestions repeat genres already watched. Taste, once a journey, becomes a cul-de-sac. The algorithm offers abundance, but only within a narrowing window, and the user adapts. Expectations shrink. Risk decreases. Content is judged not by what it says, but by how similar it feels to what came before. The world is offered on a platter, but only the part that's already been tasted. And so curiosity is replaced by comfort. Challenge is replaced by recognition. Growth stalls in a sea of agreeable choices. The algorithm succeeds by removing friction. But friction is what sharpens taste. Without it, preference dulls. Style becomes trend. Identity becomes playlist. Everything is good, and nothing is great. Even personality is absorbed into the feed. Interests become data points. Likes become categories. The self becomes predictable, not because it lacks depth, but because it is constantly fed confirmation. And what isn't liked quickly enough disappears before it can be understood. Boredom increases, but boredom never lasts, because there's always more, and always more of the same. The algorithm isn't evil, it's efficient. Its job is not to challenge, but to retain. Not to stretch, but to satisfy. It maximizes attention, not imagination. And in doing so, it transforms taste from an exploration into a habit. Even rebellion is predicted. Even weirdness is labeled. The niche becomes a tag. The underground becomes a trend. The algorithm adjusts, adapts, survives. It doesn't care what's chosen, only that the choosing never stops. The paradox finalizes. Choice is offered, and taste disappears. Not because taste is erased, but because it is never required to evolve. The system never says no, never asks why, never dares to push someone beyond what they already expect to love. And without being pushed, there's no need to wonder. The algorithm gives exactly what is asked for, and in doing so, removes the need to ask for anything else. The fix that swings too far. The problem is real. The injustice is deep. The system is cracked. The harm is undeniable. Voices rise, policies shift, change begins. There's momentum, there's urgency, there's conviction. But the fix doesn't stop at balance. It keeps moving. The pendulum, once stuck in silence, swings with fury. And the paradox forms midair. The correction that begins as healing becomes harm in reverse. Justice becomes vengeance. Accountability becomes public spectacle. The solution, once rooted in care, grows sharp. What was once about fairness now smells of fear. Systems scramble to overcorrect, to prove they've changed, to avoid scrutiny. The middle ground disappears. Nuance becomes weakness. Skepticism is treated as betrayal. In the rush to fix, listening is replaced by declarations. The conversation narrows. The space to question shrinks. Disagreement becomes danger. And the goal quietly shifts, from resolution to righteousness. From building something new to demolishing anything old. The past is rewritten. The present is policed. The future is drafted in absolutes. Even those who once advocated are swept up. No stance is pure enough. No apology complete enough. The fix that began as unity fractures into factions. One group says not fast enough. Another says too far. Dialogue becomes noise. Action becomes reaction. The very effort to heal becomes another battlefield. The paradox sharpens. The greater the pain that was ignored, the greater the pressure to fix all at once. But transformation doesn't thrive under panic. Growth can't happen at gunpoint. And when the fix forgets what it was fixing, it creates a new imbalance. One that mirrors the old, just wearing different colors. Systems built under pressure calcify into dogma. The original cause, so human, becomes institutional. A checklist, a culture, a hierarchy of correctness. The fix becomes power. And power, like always, resists reflection. Even the people at the heart of the harm, the survivors, the voices long silenced, sometimes watch as their cause is overtaken by those who shout louder. The fix becomes aesthetic, symbolic, loud and fast, but rarely deep. But the fix is necessary. It always was. It came too late. It came with weight. It came with pain. And still, if it's not careful, it becomes what it was meant to undo. The fix that swings too far doesn't fail because it began with fire. It fails when it forgets what the fire was for. The awareness that turns into performance. The world wakes up, slowly, then all at once. People talk about things once kept in shadows: privilege, bias, trauma, identity, injustice. A spotlight moves across long-forgotten corners, illuminating the unseen, the unspoken. Awareness becomes currency. Ignorance becomes shameful. And at first, it's progress. But then something shifts. The paradox tiptoes in. The more awareness is demanded, the more performative it becomes. Understanding is no longer internal. It's externalized. It's tweeted, posted, branded. Awareness becomes an accessory, a signal. Not of growth, but of alignment. The right words, the right causes, the right hashtags. The language of awakening is rehearsed. The sentiment is templated. Corporations make statements. Brands change logos. Influencers post solidarity selfies. Companies run ads in support of movements they once ignored. The conversation keeps going, but not all of it is real. Not all of it is rooted. Some of it is strategy. Some of it is survival. And some of it is just noise. Even individuals feel the pressure. To speak up. To be visible. Silence becomes suspicious. But presence can be hollow. The act of knowing becomes the act of appearing to know. And the act of appearing to know becomes more important than the uncomfortable work of actually knowing. Awareness becomes theater. It's judged by visibility, not sincerity. Measured in retweets, not reflection. And those who genuinely struggle, who question, who stumble, who learn quietly, are left behind. The show must go on. There's no time to be uncertain in a culture that punishes hesitation. The paradox tightens. True awareness requires humility, but performative awareness demands confidence. True awareness admits not knowing. Performance pretends to have arrived. The space to grow is replaced with the need to appear grown. And so, the stage expands. Entire identities are built around wokeness. Activism becomes brand strategy. Complexity is sacrificed for clarity. I see you. I hear you. I'm learning. Phrases repeated until they lose weight. The words are right. The roots are missing. But the issue isn't just the performance. It's the fatigue it creates. Audiences get cynical. The cause gets diluted. The performance of awareness starts to feel like noise. And when real issues surface, people are too tired to care, or too jaded to believe it's genuine. The message was never the problem. The messenger became the focus. Awareness was supposed to open doors. Now it polices who walks through them and how they do it. The performance becomes protection, against being called out, against being left out, against being forgotten. And still, people want to care. People want to do better, but they get stuck in the script. Because the performance is safer than the work, safer than the messy, personal, uncomfortable path of change. The awareness that turns into performance didn't start with bad intent. It started with fear, with urgency, with pain. But somewhere, it traded vulnerability for image. And in doing so, turned the mirror inward, but never deep enough to see what needed to change.